Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the members of the public to this meeting of the Development Committee. I welcome you. It's a bit cold in here, I have to tell you. We seem to have lost the heating, so you'll have to breathe heavily, and then we get the temperature up. So I do apologise. I'll be chairing this meeting today. I'm Pauline Grove-Jones, and for any of you who haven't attended these meetings before, I'll ask the officers who will be giving us advice to introduce themselves. I'll start on the left.
Good morning, my name is Jeff Lyne, I'm the Development Manager.
Good morning, Lauren Gregory, Democratic Services Officer.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, members. Good morning, members of the public. My name is Philip Rosen. I'm the Assistant Director of Planning here at North Norfolk. Thank you.
Introduce yourself. The little man. Little man. The second one.
Good morning, I'm Jo Ferner, I'm the Principal Lawyer for the Local Authority.
Matt Simberich, I'm Democratic Services.
Thank you very much. In front of me are the members who will be making the decisions on our agenda items today. Now, I'll just tell you before we start the formal business, if the fire alarm goes off, it's for real. So please don't panic, just move quietly and swiftly to the exits which are marked, and use the stairs. Do not use the lift going down, and then assemble either at the rear or the front of the building. And would I ask you please now to check your mobile phones to make sure that they are either turned off or on silent. We'll break for coffee at about 11, and this will be provided, I think, I'm not sure whether we're providing it in the foyer or not. What's happening with the coffee? And the facilities are in the foyer as well. I think that's about right. If we do go on for an extraordinary length of time, we will have a lunch break. I think that's about it of my messages. This is why we said, poor old Nigel, dear, oh dear. I think that's the end of my introductions. Apologies, please, Lauren.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Nigel Lloyd, Councillor Matthew Taylor and Councillor Andreas Fusimi.
Thank you. And substitutes?
Councillor John Toy is present as a substitute for Councillor Nigel Lloyd.
Thank you very much. We now go to item 4, the minutes of the last meeting held on the 27th of October from pages 1 to 10. Can I ask if there are any amendments to this from members? No. So can I have somebody to propose? That's Councillor Kershaw, seconded by Councillor Heinrich. Could you please, this is to accept the minutes as correct. Could you please raise your hands? Thank you. I think that's unanimous. Items of urgent business, Lauren.
There are no items of urgent business, Chairman.
Right. Order of business is as printed. So we will start off with the RIBRA one. Declarations of interest before we start. Has anybody any declarations of interest for the 6 items? Yes, Councillor Kershaw.
Thank you, Chair. Just to note that I have been lobbied by Parish Council for the first one and second one, and I have been lobbied by Chris Maltings and ABC, but just for information.
Thank you. I think I can say that we've all received various emails and publication from Chris Maltings. Members have received those. So I now go to pages 17 to 194. The 2 great RIBRA agenda applications will be taken together. We will discuss it together, but then the members will vote separately on them because they are intertwined. One can't work without the other. So I go to Officer Lyon, who will be presenting both of these, and we're starting off with PF 200523, application 1.
Okay, good morning. So the application papers start on page 17 of the agenda. So before us are two planning applications for consideration in Great Brideborough. So application 1, which is PF 200523, is for construction of 15 number of grain silos and one number, just over 5,500 square foot warehouse and associated drainage, access and external lighting. And application 2 is a hybrid application consisting of a full application for HTV access road to serve an expanded crisp malt site, and an outline application for the construction of buildings and structures required to increase the output tonnage of malt from 115,000 tonnes per annum to 175,000 tonnes. Now, these are complex proposals for a variety of reasons, as I've set out in the report, and I do appreciate you've been provided with a lot of information to read through ahead of the meeting today. So in addition to the officer report, there are 6 accompanying appendices and a set of draft planning conditions which were forwarded to members of the committee on Wednesday morning. So before I briefly run through the main considerations, I'll start with a few updates. So the Environment Agency, you'll see on page 30 of the report, it highlights the Environmental Agency's position at the time of writing the report. A further representation was received on the 21st of November by the Environment Agency. They have confirmed that guidance issued by Natural England to the local planning authorities in March of this year, advising that a nutrient neutrality approach should be used in certain planning decisions, was not replicated for applications under the environmental permitting regime. Applications under the environmental permitting regime for discharge to a watercourse were already subject to assessment and modelling of the ecological impacts on the receiving water body and catchment. The Environment Agency can advise that for its role as the competent authority in respect of environmental permitting, the existing habitats regulations assessment completed by the EA is considered adequate for discharges up to the permitted volumes and until such time as any variation is applied for. So the EA's position is quite clear that theirs is one of no objection, but officers are recommending a number of conditions as part of any recommendation for approval. Now, turning to Natural England, again on page 30 of the report, it highlights Natural England's position at the time of writing the report, and the representation was received late on the 16th of November. So Natural England have indicated that they require further information in order to determine the significance of impacts and the scope for mitigation. They've suggested the following information is required: an update to the Council's Habitats Regulations Assessment, which records North Norfolk District Council's conclusion as to whether an adverse effect on integrity will occur as a result of the development proposals. And also they've requested any necessary conditions or limitations that need to be secured to avoid any adverse effects on the integrity and or mitigation measures. So without this further information, Natural England have indicated that they may need to object to the proposal. Now, since receiving the response from Natural England, officers have provided Natural England with a copy of the committee report and appendices and a copy of the draft conditions and further comments from the council's ecologist. Despite further chases with Natural England in the last 24 hours, officers have not been able to secure updated comments from Natural England. In any event, officer recommendations set out on page 88 and 89 of the agenda requests delegated approval subject to no objection from Natural England in relation to habitats regulations matters, or subject to Natural England being comfortable with the council as competent authority to discharge its duties under the habitats regulations. So there is still more work to do with Natural England, but we say we are suggesting we delegate those matters to the Assistant Director to resolve. So turning now to further public representation, we had one further letter received late on Tuesday, came via a tortuous route via planning policy, but it's been received by officers. It's a letter of objection from Mr. Rundle of Station Road in Great Brideborough. Mr. Rundle was involved in the production of the Brideborough Neighbourhood Plan. I understand a copy of the letter was circulated to members, so hopefully you've sort of had a chance to see that. Whilst a lot of the issues contained within the letter from Mr. Rundle are captured within the public representation, which are set out across pages 23 to 29 of the agenda, the representation set out that the author of the letter does not agree with the officer assessment that the departure from the development plan in relation to landscape and extensions to businesses in the countryside is outweighed by the material planning considerations in favour in terms of the balance of the pros and cons. Ultimately, this is why the application is before committee for determination, because of the need to weigh up these competing issues and applying planning judgment. Okay, now turning to the officer report, Ryburg Parish Council's comments of objection are set out on page 22 of the agenda, and a full copy of the latest comments are attached at Appendix A. So hopefully you have a chance to read through those. And those include photographs of traffic in the village. So in terms of the main considerations, I've set out in the report under quite a number of sort of headings. So I've sort of picked up at section 1 on the principle on page 34, which sets out the key policy considerations. In section 2, I've sort of indicated the Ryburg neighbourhood plan and the weight and the status of that document. Since the applications were originally submitted, that Ryburg neighbourhood plan has now been adopted and is now part of the statutory development plan for North Norfolk. In section 3, I've considered the environmental statement and I've set out the context of the EA regulations for these applications. In section 4, I've picked up the habitats regulations assessment, and that starts at page 37. And that sets out a summary of the issues that are being considered linked to the potential impact of the proposals on the River Wensum special area of conservation and site of special scientific interest. Now, HRA matters have been a significant factor leading to delays in determination of these applications, with additional information and updates provided across multiple stages. The Habitats Regulations Assessment and appropriate assessment produced by the Council in November 2021 is attached at Appendix B across pages 97 to 143. And the further HRA addendum produced by DTA Ecology on behalf of North Norfolk District Council is attached at Appendix C across pages 145 to 176. Officers consider that subject to the imposition of conditions, a conclusion of no adverse effects on the integrity of a European site, in this case the River Wensum SAC, can be reached. However, as I've just set out in relation to updates, Natural England require a few further bits of information to enable them to remove any objections, and this will be reflected in the officer recommendation. In section 5 of the report, I touch on how the applicant is responding to a climate emergency, and that starts at page 42. And that includes information about how the applicant is proposing to address this point, which has led to a sustainability statement being submitted dated October 22, and that's attached at Appendix D across pages 177 to 184 of the agenda. Of course, the committee will recognise it's important to turn words into actions, and the commitment set out in the sustainability statement will be secured through suggested planning conditions. Officers consider that substantial positive weight should be afforded to these commitments. In terms of section 6 of the report, an extension is to existing businesses in the countryside. That starts at page 50 of the agenda, and I've set out the context of Core Strategy Policy EC3. Officers consider that the proposals do not accord with the aims of this policy because of the detrimental effects the proposal would have on the landscape character, which are considered in section 8 of the report. Turning now to highway safety on page 51 of the agenda, I set out the highway context and an assessment of both applications. The Highway Authority have indicated their overall support for the proposal as a whole, but this support is subject to securing traffic regulation orders to limit HGV traffic through the village, limiting when certain aspects of the scheme can be delivered as part of a phasing plan, ensuring existing off-site storage activities within the village cease when the warehouse is first used, and on the basis that the benefit of the HGV access is delivered as early as possible to reduce impacts within the village centre. The measures would be secured through a combination of planning conditions and legal agreements. Our discussions are ongoing with the preparation of the planning conditions and drafts of the Section 106 obligation to ensure that the highway authority objectives enabling support of the proposals are met, including ensuring it complies with the SIL regulations. I'll touch on those at the end. In section 8 of the report, I consider the impact on landscape. I'm starting at page 60. This section runs through the landscape impacts of both proposals. Now, whilst lighting impacts can be made acceptable through imposition of conditions, the report concludes landscape impacts would be contrary to the aims of core strategy policy EN2. Now, these impacts would weigh against the grants of planning permission as set out in the conclusions for each application. Turning now to noise impacts, it's section 9, which starts at page 68. Whilst the silos and warehouse and new access road and increase in output tonnage of malt would likely add to additional noise sources, subject to the imposition of conditions to control activities on site, both application 1 and application 2 would be capable of being made acceptable in planning terms and would accord with development plan policy. In section 10, I focus on the impact on residential amenity, starting at page 71. And you'll see there's a summary on page 74. I say that when considered as a whole, the residential amenity impacts of the development is in the main capable of being made acceptable in planning terms via planning conditions, legal obligations, and traffic regulation orders. There are positive benefits through reductions in HGV traffic using Fakenham Road, Station Road, and Bridge Road, to which significant weight should be given. However, these positive benefits overall need to be tempered slightly by the impact of the warehouse for an extended period until landscape mitigation matures, and as a result of adverse impacts likely to arise as a result of the noise and disturbance impact from the increase in the output tonnage of malt, including on the amenity value of the land along Highfield Lane. So in section 11, I pick up surface water drainage matters, and that starts at page 74. This was one of the issues linked to habitats regulations, and officers considered that surface water drainage matters in relation to application 1 and application 2 are satisfactorily resolved, and the required mitigation measures can be secured through imposition of appropriate planning conditions. So in terms of impact on ecology and biodiversity, which starts at page 78 of the report, in the current form and based on the existing supporting information, and notwithstanding the information set out at Appendix F, pages 187 to 193 of the agenda, the Council's Landscape Officer for Ecology considers the development proposals for both applications would fail to accord with policy EN9 of the core strategy and other relevant local and national policies. Now, officers do recognise and acknowledge the concerns raised by the Landscape Officer, but consider that through the use of the granting condition, it would be possible to secure the necessary ecological scheme with the aim to reduce impacts, remedy and offset and compensate where impacts on ecological features are unavoidable. Now, conditions have been drafted on the basis of securing a percentage of biodiversity net gain. Now, officers would like to see this sort of at or close to 10% net gain, but the applicant is yet to commit to a final figure because they're just doing their maths in terms of how that would work out. Now, subject to securing an acceptable scheme, officers consider on balance the proposal would be compliant with objectives as core strategy policy EN9 and the general biodiversity objective set out within the Natural Environment and Rural Communities Act. So turning to phasing of delivery, which starts at page 83 of the agenda. So whilst it was envisaged that phasing matters would be secured by way of conditions, and I did include a set of conditions in the draft, it is now looking likely that this would be secured across both applications through a Section 106 application, and this affects the recommendation for both applications, which I'll come to in a second. So in terms of cumulative impacts at page 84, the environment statement is submitted on the basis of both proposals occurring together, and officers consider that cumulative impacts issues are appropriately assessed by the applicant. again, conditions will be required to secure mitigation in line with agreed phasing plans. In terms of material planning conditions at page 85 of the agenda, this section sets out a range of economic benefits associated with the application and a number of other benefits. And in the planning balance on page 84 of the agenda, this section outlines the material considerations in favour and considerations against, which we've indicated weight to be afforded to those issues. We're nearly there. So in terms of conclusion, it starts at page 88 of the agenda. So as I say, these are significant planning applications which individually and cumulatively have impacts on the surrounding area, some of which are negative impacts and which would amount to departures from the development plan, but many are positive impacts that would collectively attract sufficient positive weight to outweigh the conflicts with the development plan and thus enable a conditional grant of planning permission. So the applicant has provided a significant volume of information within the environmental statement and addendums from January 21 and March 22 and across supporting documentation. Now, this additional information has helped address key matters, including those linked to the understanding of the impact of the scheme on the River Wensum, particularly those impacts associated with the increase in output tonnage of malt from 115,000 tonnes in any one calendar year to 172,000 tonnes, such that a positive way forward has been identified with the assistance of DTA Ecology. In order to grant permission, the Development Committee would need to be satisfied that North Norfolk District Council, as a competent authority under the Habitats regulations, has properly assessed and exercised its duty to help protect, conserve and restore European sites. Officers can now give that assurance to the Development Committee that HRA matters have been properly addressed. As I say, this is subject to Natural England confirming their final position. So these applications represent a significant milestone in the history of the Chris malting site at Great Ribah. Whilst Chris do have a strong reputation for producing some of the finest malted barley in the world and have indicated ambitions to reduce environmental impacts, it is only right that if permission is granted and operations significantly expand, that every effort is taken to secure commitments that ensure that expanded operations are undertaken in a way that reduces adverse impacts on the environment. But the applicant's commitments are set out in the sustainability statement from October 22 to be secured as part of the permissions and would provide a robust framework for delivery of the identified 10 strategies, including a net zero strategy that will aid the transition to achieving net zero carbon by 2050. And this is in line with government legislation. So these applications are the first in the district to secure such commitments, and the applicant should be commended for their stated ambitions in this regard. These proposals will derive environmental benefits far beyond the application site and will help shape positive farming practices involved in all aspects of the production of barley to be used by the malting site. So taking all of the issues into consideration, officers can make, on balance, a positive recommendation for both applications. So in light of the recommendation about the phasing of development, officers consider this would affect the order in which the application decision should be taken, and officers recommend application 2 is taken first and then application 1 is considered thereafter, primarily because of the HGV traffic access road that's required. So in respect of section 106 obligation requirements, whilst figures for the cost of traffic regulation orders are to be finalised with the Highway Authority, officers can consider obligations are compliant with the soil regulations and that they are necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms, directly related to development, and fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind to the development. So that brings us to the recommendation, and this is one that's slightly amended from one that's in your agenda pack. And if not, Lauren, you can go to the last 2 slides. Yeah. So for application 2, which is the hybrid application of full and outline permission, PF 200524, the recommendation is one of delegated approval to the Assistant Director for Planning subject to no objection from Natural England in relation to habitats regulations matters or confirmation they're comfortable for the council as competent authority to discharge its duties under the habitats regs. Subject to the completion of the section 106 obligation, and you'll see there's an additional strand to the 106 relating to phasing arrangements from that in your report, including cessation of off-site storage and securing traffic regulation orders. Subject to the imposition of appropriate conditions and any other conditions that may be considered necessary at the discretion of the Assistant Director for Planning. Now, we've recommended that the application be brought back to committee within 3 months if the 106 obligation isn't being progressed satisfactorily. We don't think we'll be at that point, but I will add that referral back to committee should be at the discretion of the Assistant Director. So if things are positively moving forward, there's no need to bring it back to committee for determination. So in terms of application 1, the recommendation again is one of approval, subject to the no objection from Natural England. Again, the phasing arrangements being in the 106 obligations, and again the note about referring it back to committee in terms of the 106 obligation. Thank you, Chair. Over to you.
Thank you. We now go to the Could I please ask members to use their microphones? I was specifically asked to say that, so there we are. Mrs. Savory, if you'd like to sit down at the, yes, at the, I think Matt, can you show You have 12 minutes, Mrs. Savory.
I don't need 12.
6 minutes, I beg your pardon, 6 minutes. You don't need it, good.
Well, probably not. Thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of Ryburg Parish Council. I'm very disappointed and appalled that your planning officer should suggest that you approve these mountains of plans without visiting the site, particularly in the light of the Lymington decision, which you've all had copies of, I think. All the policies, all the plans are against the policies that you have in place at the NNDC. Ryburg is not a development village, either for industry or housing. Please remember that. In all these plans, which I hope you have fully read and understood, there is no regard for the inhabitants of the village. The street is the same as it has been since I first came to Ryburg over 50 years ago. The pavements are still inadequate, but mounted regularly by lorries and cars as they try to pass each other. You'll see that in the photographs you've seen. This is a young village, unlike the rest of North Norfolk, and no regard is made for the safety of parents with pushchairs, children on bikes. The Maltings were partners in producing the Ryburg neighbourhood plan and have turned their back on what they agreed at the time. The Maltings continues to discharge an average of over 1,000 cubic metres to 1,000 tonnes of dirty water into the River Wensum daily. This river is one of 256 in the UK designated as a SAC, in addition to being a triple SI. No mention of this is made in the plans to alter this. There are 3 main polluters of the River Wensum, 2 sewage works and Chris Maltings. Mr. Lyon has received a letter, which you've all had a copy of, from Natural England, stating that the application should have potential significant effects on the Wensum special areas of conservation and as a site of special scientific interest, and further information is required so the NNDC is in a position to conclude that there will be no adverse effect on the River Wensum, etc., etc. In light of this letter, this meeting should be deferred until Natural England is satisfied that the correct information has been received. I do not feel that these plans will ever satisfy Natural England. Whatever is built will adversely affect the River Wensum one way or another. I would urge you to visit Great Ryburg before you decide about these plans. It is a rural village being turned into an industrial zone by CMG. When I came to Ryburg, the Maltings was a family-run business. Now it is a multi-million, multinational business run by absentee shareholders. None of the management staff live in the village, neither do the people supporting this application. Please remember that there have been 125 letters of objection. A site visit is a must. The acreage of the site is over 15. There is an intention to build a storage unit covering 2 acres, and 15 silos covering yet more land. The storage unit is nearly 13 metres at the apex of the roof. Number 58 Fakenham Road is 5. The village cannot sustain further development when served by sea roads and a medieval narrow bridge for half the traffic. Are you telling me that all the traffic will come from the Durham Road without a TRO in place? Do we want a TRO which will limit its use for other vehicles? Can the planned road really make any difference when there is no intention to move the entrance to the plant in the middle of the village? If you've seen the plans, you have noticed this. With this massive road, which will cover land that has been in an environmental scheme for over 20 years, 5 fields with boundaries have not changed since the Enclosure Act of the 1700s, comes the outline permission to increase production by over 50%. 50% more traffic, noise and smells. Please consider this, follow your policies and turn down all these applications. What is in it? What is in all this for the villagers of Great Ryborough? The maximum number of extra staff required to run this extension is just 4. So please don't tell me it is an employment opportunity. Or try to tell me that farmers who are ever resourceful with new ideas will not be able to grow anything if they don't grow barley. The amount of land available for growing crops is decreasing year on year. So where is the need to increase production by over 50%? I'm not sure what percentage of the malt produced goes into beer. It's a luxury rather than necessity for everyday living. Again, I ask, what will the people of Ryborough gain from living in an industrial village? Crisp malt will be better served building a new complex served by A roads at another site. Please think carefully about these plans and visit the site to see for yourself exactly what happened to my part of Norfolk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Avery. If you'd like to return to your seat. Our second speaker is Mrs. Nina Bassett. You'd like to come up? I believe you do have, is it 12 minutes? Now, do you know how that microphone, it's the second one? Your time starts as soon as you start speaking.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to speak before you today. My name is Nina Bassett and I'm a resident of Great Ryborough. I am very perplexed at the recommendations made by your officer and this planning committee within the executive summary in regard to CRISP's proposed plans. A neighbourhood development plan, the NDP, in consultation with the villagers, came into force as a planning document in June 2021. This was a direct consequence of CRISP's planning application for a lorry park. It was intended to give the village a voice upon the future of the industrial site in Ryborough. There was a point to including CRISP, who were fully involved in the creation of the NDP. However, it would now seem that CRISP have completely forgotten their pledge to the villagers and have ignored the promises that they made at the time, as today's applications, both made in March 2020, are in many ways in contradiction of the policies of the NDP, policies that CRISP agreed to at the time. CRISP's proposals are major development and are contrary to the wishes of the majority of villagers, as noted from the many written objections that are referred to in your officer's executive summary. It is clear from the executive summary that whether or not these planning applications will be granted will be decided upon a balance of pros and cons. I refer you to paragraph 16, page 70 of the executive summary, in which the summary weighs up the material planning considerations for and against. Your officer comes to a conclusion that I and many others cannot support, a conclusion which I believe it is not possible to come to upon the pros and cons that he has cited. CRISP's current proposals will have an enormous, far-reaching and long-standing effect on the village. The village will become blighted forever with an industrial site truly out of scale with a rural settlement. In my view, which is shared by so many fellow villagers, there is a fundamental planning failure of having a major industrial site in the centre of our village. It cannot be sensible to put an industrial site with the noise, pollution and disturbance of amenity that industry implies in the centre of a small rural village. Neither can it be sensible to reinforce a planning anomaly by granting planning permission to extend that site and its activities. Initially, many years ago, when the railway was in existence, this was the site that was suitable for CRISP, but planning has granted numerous extensions, and by increment, the site has become out of scale with the village. To increase the site and its activities by nearly 50% would simply be illogical and frankly damaging to all other stakeholders. CRISP's existing HGV traffic has been the subject of complaint for very many years. CRISP has been on notice that its traffic is a nuisance. It is not reasonable to argue that a nuisance caused by CRISP should be solved to the advantage of CRISP. In any event, an expansion of the business by nearly 50% will involve considerable additional traffic, some of which will be HGV of third parties visiting the site over which CRISP has no control. As you have seen from your photos, the village has a single road. Any traffic must necessarily pass down that road. The traffic must pass through a historic conservation area, over a single lane bridge, over the river and through the 2 right angle bends of the main road. Many near misses have been witnessed between 2 lorries trying to pass, lorries and pedestrians, and lorries and other vehicles coming through the village. As Mrs. Savoury mentioned, and as your application shows, there is an application for a new road to be put in place. However, because this road will not address the fact that the entrance to CRISP is in the middle of the village, and unless the weighbridge is moved, the HGVs simply won't use that new road because they'll still have to come into the middle of the village to use the weighbridge. So frankly, I don't think it's particularly useful. So moving on. In the executive summary, there is mention that there will be a likely increase in business rate income. Is this even a proper planning consideration? It certainly does not address the concerns that surround this application. The application is not concerned with the risks of pollution of the River Wensum or the long-term damage to the landscape or the traffic, noise and disturbance to amenities caused by a large expanded industrial site. CRISP have provided a sustainability statement in October 2022. Indeed, it is the responsibility of all of us to reduce our carbon footprint. CRISP should, in any event, be taking all action it can to do so. The production of a statement at this late stage in the application with the promise that CRISP will do the best it can is simply virtue signalling and should not be taken into account. It is far too little and added in at far too late a stage of the application process. It is an unsustainable plan. There will be, without doubt, an adverse landscape impact. This is surely a serious matter. It is a failure to comply with the core strategy policy and with NDP policies. Damage to the landscape is permanent. Why make policies to protect the landscape for us all if they are to be waived when convenient? Under planning law, are there not requirements that all development should be sustainable? These proposals are clearly not. CRISP are clearly failing to accord with the requirements of core strategy policy EC3. This policy to limit unwelcome extension of businesses in the countryside is not being adhered to in these plans. In fact, it could not be more apposite. The policy EC3 is intended to prevent exactly what is proposed by these applications, i.e. an unwelcome extension of an existing business into land designated as countryside. Why should it be waived on this occasion? It must have always been clear to CRISP that development of its business on this site would be constrained because of its location. It is arguably irresponsible of CRISP to look to expand on this site. They should have been planning for the future. The residents of Great Ryborough are entitled to rely upon the planning policies that they understood would apply when they decided to make their lives in the village. The proposed increase in operation by 50% is simply not a sensible, sustainable, or viable proposition. There is an alternative which CRISP should consider for their long-term planning. The lorries which presently travel through the village and all additional lorry traffic could travel to a malting set up on a proper industrial site elsewhere. In summary, I ask the committee to review with very great care and to support the conclusion that this is the wrong place for the proposed development, and CRISP should and could have planned their expansion elsewhere, and this planning committee should be encouraging them to do so. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mrs. Bassett. If you'd like to return to your seat. Now, does anybody from the members want to see the presentation up on screen? Right, could we see that, please, Lauren? And could you just talk us through it, please, Jeff?
Okay, so the presentation pack that members should have, so starts with the site location plan and it sort of zooms into where the sort of red dots are. So you can see the Great Ryborough village itself, showing the location of the malting site and also the location of the River Wensum Special Area Conservation. The next slide shows the two applications, so it indicates the land associated with application 1 in red and application 2 in blue. And then the slides run through the different sort of proposals as part of application 1. So showing the location of the silos on land adjoining the existing site. And the next slide shows the sort of the elevations of those silos. Okay. Oh, we'll go back one. Yes, it's sort of showing the height of those. And these are all detailed in the report in terms of the scale and numbers, things like that. And then the next slide shows the location of the warehouse on the site. You can see the properties on Fakenham Road to the south of the sort of red shown warehouse building. That's showing us the elevations of the warehouse that's cut into the ground. And then the next slide will show sections through the site and the relationship with properties onto Fakenham Road. These plans are quite memory intensive. So yes, they're showing the landscape screening that's proposed in year 1 and in year 15, showing sort of how that will mature to screen the two areas of the site. So the next slide shows the planting mitigation that's being proposed for application 1. So there's sort of planting associated with the warehouse building and planting to do with the proposed attenuation basin. So the next slide then shows the location of the access road in blue. And the following slide is a more detailed cross-section through a section through to Highfield Lane. Highfield Lane is sort of the pink line shown on the site, and it shows how the new access road would cross that, including the new turning head for Highfield Lane. And so this is just another view showing the access road going into the site as part of the sort of master plan for the development. And again, a more detailed sort of view showing that sort of master plan for the whole site. So there in that slide, you can see in number 1, the warehouse and the silos, and the outline bit it's showing 2 buildings, but obviously that's not what we're approving today. It's just a principle of development that would enable the output tonnage to increase up to 175,000 tonnes per year. The road is the bit that's the full permission is applied for today. And then the next slide shows what's currently proposed as planting mitigation for the access road, and so showing sort of the main routes along there. And then I've included some site photographs that I've taken just to sort of give a sort of broad context of how the malting site sits within the landscape. So just sort of indicated where you can see the site. This is sort of further west along Fakenham Road. And then the next photo is close to where the access point would go for the new HGV access road on Fakenham Road, showing existing residential properties and the proximity of Highfield Lane, and a sort of broad indication of where the road would go across the field. And then the next photo is taken pretty much where the Highfield Lane message is there. So that's looking back up to Fakenham Road. And you can see, say, properties at Highfield Close and 146 Fakenham Road. And then the next photo is taken further up on Highfield Lane, looking back towards the malting site. I've indicated where the maltings broadly is, and sort of marked where the new HGV access road would go across the fields to go into the application site. And then the next photo is one that we had as part. We did have some video images of the site, and I've extracted some of those to show sort of a high level. I mean, obviously, no one's going to see from this position in terms of residents, but it's just to kind of give you a context of the site and what's going on here. And I've annotated that photograph in the next slide, so hopefully that was helpful for you, sort of explaining what's happening across the site. So the yellow is the access road coming in, and it's gone across Highfield Lane. You've got the surface water attenuation that's in relation to application 1, the 15 number of silos and the warehouse. And I've indicated where landscaping mitigation will be provided in association with that, and the location of the outline application land. And then we run on to sort of highlighting the main issues. So hopefully that's useful for you, Joe.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. I now go to the supporting members. Our first supporting member to speak on these applications is Mr. David Holliday. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Holliday, from the time you start speaking. It's a little man.
We're there. Thank you very much for letting me speak. I'm going to be slightly different because I'm just going to give the perspective of one of Chris' customers. Along with my wife, I started Norfolk Brewhouse from Ingaze Rails in a little village called Hindringham, quite close to Ryborough, 10 years ago. And like many of the 40 plus microbrewers in Norfolk, across Norfolk, we very much promote the provenance of Maris Otter and the provenance of Chris Maltings as local. And that provenance has played a big part in the development of our business and in the development of how we market our business over this time. Excuse me. And it's not just a nice thing to do. We do it because it matters. It matters to the quality of our produce, it matters to the quality of our grain, and it matters to the message. And the fact that Chris Maltings support the local brewers in the way they do is also enhanced by the fact that there are 20 countries, over 20 brewers in over 20 countries across the world that demand Maris Otter from Norfolk, but demand Maris Otter from North Norfolk and Chris Maltings. So they're not just a local supporter, they're a global ambassador of North Norfolk, and I think that's incredibly important. And just to give you an example of how that represents itself, back in 2015, Maris Otter, which is famed the world over in North Norfolk, celebrated its 50 years as a barley. It's a bit Monty Python to describe a barley having a birthday. But I had this mad vision that it was so important to North Norfolk, and it puts North Norfolk on the global map, that I wanted a brewer from every county in the UK to brew a special birthday beer, and bring it to Norfolk and sell it at a special festival. But beyond that, I wanted to get some countries to do their own beer and bring it to Norfolk. And everyone thought I was absolutely crazy. Why would any brewer do that? Disrupt their schedule, disrupt something that is commercially non-viable, to do something to give a barley and Chris Maltings a birthday. Within 10 days of having this idea, we had 50 brewers signed up in this country, and we had 5 brewers from all over the world that brewed a special beer, came to Norfolk, sold it. And to me, that just represents the value that Crisp have, that's often unseen, of putting on a global stage this part of North Norfolk. And it's very important. It's not just where they're located. It's not just because they're there in their family history. It's actually a climate region, a climate reason why the barley is so good in North Norfolk. So it's vital that Chris retain that continuity and that stability in North Norfolk. It's not just something you can pick up and move. You can't pick up and move a climate and a terroir. And they really do a huge job to promote what they do and to promote the area. And when we did that festival back in 2015, we're just tiny. There's 7 of us. We're not a big brewer. To Chris brewer, tiny little customer, but you wouldn't know it because they support all their customers so well. But back in 2015, we totted up, said, well, how many, if all of us little brewers have built our business based on Maris Otter?
I'm sorry, Mr. Holiday, you have had your 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. They matter to North Norfolk, they really do.
Yes, thank you. If you'd like to return to your seat. My next speaker is Mrs. Rebecca G. If you'd like to come up. You also have 3 minutes, Mrs. G, but well done.
Thank you for allowing me to speak in support of the application. I wanted to highlight today the employment opportunities offered by Chris Malting and these opportunities that are aiding in the growth within the local economy. 8 years ago, when I left university, I was faced with the decision, like many of my friends, whether to stay within the local area where my family lived or whether to move to pursue a professional career. Luckily for me, I was offered a graduate role in Chris Maltings, which allowed me to do both. During my time at Chris Maltings, I've been afforded numerous training opportunities and opportunities for career progression within the company. And this has given me a number of transferable skills that I can use not just within the business, but within the local community as well. I've been lucky enough to be involved in a number of recruitment drives within Chris Maltings, most recently attending a local job fair, promoting local jobs for local people. Chris Maltings also supports a number of local training providers. I myself am currently studying towards a Master's in Business Administration at the University of East Anglia, which is supported through a senior leadership apprenticeship, which Chris Malt supports. I've also been lucky enough to act as a mentor for a number of apprentices within the business, and this is in collaboration with the College of West Anglia, providing apprenticeships for young people within the engineering and food processing industry. We were able to offer this through the year of 2020, which I think we can agree was a difficult year for everybody. In summary, in my opinion, the expansion can only be a good thing. It will provide more jobs and more training opportunities, not just in the engineering and production, as you might think, but as the head offices at Ryborough, it also provides opportunity in disciplines such as finance, marketing, sales, and many more. It's not just the jobs at Chris Malting that the business supports, but also by supporting the local businesses, more jobs are created further afield. Businesses such as Chris allow for talent not just to remain in the local area, but also attracts talent to the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. If you'd like to go and sit down. Our next speaker is Mr. Stuart Sands from Chris Maltings, I believe. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Sands. You'd just like to turn on. That's it. Thank you.
My name is Stuart Sands. I'm the CEO of Chris Malt and our group of companies. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. The benefits of granting planning are very large for both our existing maltings and the proposed new maltings to Village Life and for North Norfolk. North Norfolk is a unique and special place. The heritage of being part of the community for over 150 years are what make Chris Malt who they are. The grant of planning allows this to be preserved while also allowing it to be achieved in a more sustainable manner into the future. Sustainability is of paramount importance to our group. We are on a journey, our customers are on a journey, and the world is on a journey to improve. We can only improve by continuing to make investments in our assets. Reducing our water consumption will be achieved through the deployment of available and proven technologies. We will not need to increase our extraction license for water. We will lower the nutrient levels to a lower level than today. Newer equipment consumes less energy. We will update our current combined heat and power systems, which is a highly efficient way of taking gas and green hydrogen when it is available, capturing the heat from the power generated to reduce our overall environmental impact. Our brewing and distilling customers wish to achieve net zero by 2040 across their value chain. We can only meet this target with them by investing. A major benefit for everyone will be the significant reduction of HGVs from the village. The new road allows the trucks to avoid the village and enter through the back of the site. Last week, I walked the site to understand the flow of traffic accommodating the weighbridge, and this will be achieved. We will remove tractor trailer movements between our site and our other storage site in the village with a new warehouse, which will be powered by solar. The removal of traffic from the village will ensure it is more tranquil, enjoyable. There will be a reduction in emissions and noise. We are committing to planting in excess of 1 hectare, enhancing biodiversity in the village and around the plant. As a major employer across the UK and Europe, we are headquartered in Ryborough. There is substantial economic benefit through our direct and indirect spending. Our direct payroll covers more than 120 full-time skilled employees with a payroll run of over 5 million per annum. We offer apprentice programs and graduate programs. We use local subcontractors and suppliers to maintain and service our equipment. We purchase local barley. The grant of planning allows the existing maltings and future maltings to be more sustainable and competitive, and ensures that our headquarters will remain in North Norfolk. We look forward to continuing to be part of the community, a good neighbour, and helping North Norfolk flourish.
Thank you, Mr. Sands. Well timed. You'd like to return to your seat? Our final speaker in supporting these applications is Mr. Jim Patworth. If you'd like to come up, Mr. Patworth. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Patworth.
Madam Chairman, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, I address you as chairman of the group of farmers and farm businesses who supply crisps under the umbrella of the ABC Group. There are 180 of us in the group who grow and deliver up to 100,000 tonnes of malting barley to the maltings. There are only 2 merchants involved who coordinate all the logistics between the growers and the maltings, Adamson Howling at Great Plumstead and Banhams of Hempton near Fakenham. Malting barley is a very important and environmentally friendly crop in Norfolk's agriculture, and our area has a wonderful reputation for the quality of the crop that we produce. The group offers the provenance demanded by crisps customers, noting that our barley crop ticks all the boxes of sustainability. It doesn't require shed loads of fertilizers or indeed vast quantities of chemicals or fuel. Furthermore, we're on a pathway of carbon reduction and regenerative cropping. Crisps are primed to make a very significant capital investment at Great Ryborough, which includes expenditure on the local road network and other benefits to the parish. As well as increasing their capacity, it will also benefit the local economy in many ways, including jobs and rates. There can hardly be a parish in your district council area where barley is not grown. So you will understand how important we all feel this is. I notice there have been objections from local people. However, please treat this address as high level of support from 180 farm businesses in our area. I'm fearful that Crisps investment could go elsewhere if they're not able to expand at Great Ryborough. Please do all in your power to persuade your colleagues and officers to approve the proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Papworth. If you'd like to return to your seat. I now go to the local member, Councillor Fitzpatrick. You have 5 minutes, Vincent.
Right,
Oh, double time, is it double time? Oh, aye, you have 10 minutes, Vincent.
I've got 10 minutes. I promise not to use 10 minutes. If I do, you can shoot me.
Well, we don't want any bloodshed in here.
Well, I hope not. Good morning, Madam Chairman, members, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to thank Jeff Lyon and all officers who worked on these applications for the hard work in getting the applications before us today. I know a tremendous amount of blood, sweat and tears have gone into this. The committee report runs about 170 pages of detailed and technical analysis. However, I actually want to start by giving you some historical context. The early settlements in Great Ryborough grew up around the river near when St Andrew's Church stood since Saxon times. Moving on to 1870 and moving further west, over 150 years ago, the first maltings was established. And over the years, Great Ryborough and the maltings have grown up hand in hand together along Faken Road and Station Road. It'd be true to say that Great Ryborough exists in its current form because of the maltings, and the maltings exists in its current form because of Great Ryborough. The maltings gives Great Ryborough tremendous support, including, for example, helping establish the community shop. The community spaces are owned by the maltings. Some community spaces are owned by the maltings. I'll go on to say I support the officer's recommendation for delegated approval of both applications, and ask after due consideration of the balance of material planning matters, the committee approves these applications. I'll tell you why I'm asking this, because the public benefits of improved local community, economic development within North Norfolk and the wider East Anglia region, and a more sustainable production process outweigh the public disbenefits. So let's look at these in more detail. I'm not going to do a blow-by-blow account because the information is in the report. So improved local community. The new proposals for the HGV relief road will reduce the number of HGV movements through the village. That's a fact. And I feel the applicant is really trying to help the village improve the traffic situation through the village by building this road. And except there's some disagreement on the number of movements, the degree of reduction, except there's some disagreements there. However, building a road, which is not cheap, several £1 million going into it, and the proposed traffic regulation orders will result in substantial reduction in HG movements through the village, and that'll be a substantial improvement in the living conditions of people living there. But the kind of, to my mind, the compelling argument is economic development. And I won't need to remind you about the current economic crisis, both nationally and globally. We've talked about it often enough in this council chamber. These applications really do have significant and compelling economic gains for North Norfolk and the region. And as been pointed out previously, our climate is the most, our region, rather, our district has the most amazing climate for growing a wide range of crops, but in particular the Maris Otter barley. I think it's North Norfolk and somewhere in Denmark have these conditions that produce a first-class product. But despite the advantages we have with our agriculture, it's a sad fact that we do very little value-added processing of our produce locally. Not doing so actually exports jobs and income that can be created in our district. These jobs and this income is actually exported to outside our district, which is a crying shame. So here we have a proposal for increased value-added processing it's been to create jobs, income within North Norfolk, and has been stated the jobs in maltings aren't just malting the barley, but there's a whole range of support activity. The headquarters is there, the lab and research is all there. So as well as making stuff, it's a centre of knowledge, developing for the techniques. And really, I think we should try and keep these and expand these jobs within our district. Chris Malt rather is part of a supply chain. So we've heard from the upstream and we've heard from the downstream. So the upstream are the growers. The growers can produce a fantastic crop, which can be malted sustainably locally, and these have malted. The malt produced is, as it's been said, sold locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally. The economic impact of the supply chain, of the upstream supply chain, is tremendous. It's valuable. It supports, as mentioned, 280 plus farmers, which is a tremendous achievement for one operation. But let's look at the downstream as well. The downstream are many food and drink processors. So malt goes into beer, whiskey, and other foodstuffs. But one thing I'd like to call out is explosive growth in microbreweries in North Norfolk, and the ready supply of a good quality malt has actually fueled this dramatic expansion. And these businesses, many of them, these are local and sustainable. These employ people living, working in or near a village. So a brewer can actually work near home rather than taking a trip into Norwich or down to Southwold to practice his trade. So the further economic impacts are, of course, the fact that there is an economic turnover. The people who are employed directly and indirectly by the maltings, its suppliers and its customers, all engage in economic activity. They spend money mostly in North Norfolk. They help our shops. They buy goods and services, and that economic activity increases prosperity of our district, and the increase in production capacity will further increase this economic cycle. So the economic benefits of these proposals are tremendous. Move on to sustainability. The new production facilities, as mentioned, will actually produce more output, but using the resources in a much more friendly manner, much less resource intensive, with greater reuse of energy and water. Proposed introduction of solar panels, all of which means that we can move to a much more sustainable production process. Finally, I'd like to comment on landscape matters. To my mind, the maltings, it's been there in the landscape for 150 years. It's actually part of the landscape. It's been there so long, it is actually part of the landscape. And over that time, it has changed, and under these proposals will change, just as other landscape artifacts have changed. It's a bit like some people think that wind turbines on land look beautiful. Look like, give me that look, Pauline. Some people think that, but I think the maltings are so well established, it is actually part of the landscape rather than an adjunct. And finally, as local member, I've received comments from residents. Yep, most are against the development, but in fact, some of these people who are against any development are against the maltings in general and just hope that they disappear and go away. But there's also a degree of support, and that's the silence minority, if you want. And the third class of local residents who have spoken with me basically shrug their shoulders and say, I'm not bothered, the maltings are here, go away, expand or don't. So we have locally a wide range of views. But once again, I would urge the committee to support the delegated approval of these applications. Thank you.
Oh, gosh, well done. Thank you. Thank you, Vincent.
All right, thank you.
Now we now go to the members, if you'd like to. I'll just put down some names so I don't forget. I think we've got almost the whole committee is talking on this one. Have I missed anybody else? Did you want to speak, Adam? Good heavens, no. Right. Gerard, Councillor Mancini-Brand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I never go first, but it's a bit unusual. It's just clarification really, because it's quite a big application, this one. My first point is I'm not happy with on the recommendation from our officers. They say no objection from Natural England. Well, surely that's not correct, because they've not approved it either. We haven't actually had a report from them, so I find that a little bit misleading. The other bit that I'm a bit confused about is on page 137 and 138. It says adversely impact on the River Wensum. Now, when I look at this lovely thing that we all sent, it says the efficient plant and the reduction of nutrients in the River Wensum. I'm a bit confused, which is correct. One seems to be against the other. And the last point I'd like to make, sorry, Madam Chair, is this access road. Am I right in hearing from one of the speakers that the HGVs actually have to go through Ryborough to get to the access road? Or, right, so that's not correct then.
Well, I'll ask.
Okay, that's my 3 points I'd like to raise, Madam Chair. Thank you.
All right, Officer Lyon, if you could answer those 3 points, please.
I may need to get some clarification on your second point, because I was just trying to find the bit that you were referring to. Would you say page 137?
Your second point.
137, 138. It's in red.
Okay. Right, so we'll start with the Natural England point.
Okay.
So when we're doing a habitat regulations assessment, we are the competent authority. North Norfolk District Council has to do the work. So that's why the application's taken a while to get to committee, because we've produced our own HRA back in November last year, which is the document that you've referred to. That page 137 is the November 2021 document. So we've raised a number of questions and we've gone back to the applicant to get clarification on those points. So the points you're raising, the red, those were the questions that we were going back to the applicant on to get answers, and that led to further submissions, the March 2022 EA addendum, and then that led to us appointing DTA Ecology to give us the second HRA assessment. So we've done all that we can as a local planning authority to set out our position on habitats regs, and it's now with Natural England to look at those responses and confirm, do they agree with them or do they not agree with them? Now they come back asking some additional questions, and we're trying to make sure they've got the information they need to advise us. At the end of the day, it's not Natural England making the decision. We're the ones that have to make the decision. So we're the ones that have to go through those steps of doing the HRA process. You can, as an authority, ignore Natural England. I wouldn't recommend you do that, but you can ignore Natural England's advice. But if you do ignore it, you have to justify why you were ignoring it. Now, we're not saying you should ignore Natural England's advice here. we're saying you should delegate authority to the assistant director to make a decision, and we'll carry on those discussions with Natural England to make sure they are satisfied that we can properly discharge our duties as a competent authority.
Is that okay, Jared?
I think I picked up the second point as well. I mean, the points in red on page 137, they're the points that were raised as part of our first HRA assessment. So they've been, they've moved on now. They've been answered in the second HRA addendum.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kershaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am familiar with the site as portfolio holder for sustainable growth. I've visited the site on many occasions. That hasn't swayed my judgment, but having been familiar with the process of the planning to date, it's very pleasing to see the carbon reduction measures that have come to pass since the original applications. I'm very pleased to see the fact that the water abstraction will be within the existing license. I think that's very important, and the measures taken to control the amount of water in the steepage tanks is commendable. The new road does, I believe, and the TROs behind it, which I've discussed before, are essential, and I think they will reduce traffic on the village roads. Though one clarification I would like, there seemed to be a difference in opinion about whether the weighbridge would be accessible from within the site, but one of the objectors said that all the trucks would have to drive through to get to the weighbridge. I'd like clarification on that point. It's not a simple matter of saying move this more maltings to a different site. We don't have those sites in North Norfolk. We would lose employment. This is supporting 180 farmers in a terroir that grows the crop. We would be, if the factory moved, either that crop would have to go much further, which would be a carbon addition. And believe you me, if the investment wasn't to go forward and the site didn't expand, economically, it would close. If it closed, it wouldn't be mothballed. That would become a housing estate, and there would be an increase in traffic, in my opinion. So I actually have to say that the report that I've read and I've studied carefully is a very well written document, and I commend officers for doing it. I've read all the ecological reports as well, and I have to say that I am in favour of this application. I would support it. I will propose.
You're proposing.
Acceptance. Thank you.
Proposing support. Right, thank you. Councillor Withington.
Morning.
Morning.
Like Councillor Kershaw, I had concerns about the weighbridge situation, so I shall look forward to hearing a response on that. I think an important part of this for me is two sides: the impact on the river, the local river, and the water system. We obviously got an SAC and a triple SI, which is important, and it appears from the work that we've done in that area that you seem now confident that we are not having the significant impact that was first suspected. And I'm pleased that we are going back to Natural England. I would not like to think of us as authority as ignoring their suggestions. So that has alleviated some of my concerns. For me, like Councillor Kershaw, I think the cyclical nature of this business, and it goes across the district, and we don't often deal with something that genuinely goes across the district, and I think this does. So it's a put my teeth back in, the cyclical nature of this business and in the local economy, I think is very important. And in addition, I know from Sheringham that we have farmers that are contributing and using crisp maltings. We have people who are on graduate employment from their living in Sheringham. So it genuinely is across the district. So with everything I've heard at the moment, and I will continue to listen to the debate, but at this stage, I am in favour of this application.
Are you seconding this?
Yes.
Thank you. Would you like to give the answer to the Weybridge?
Okay, so.
Do you know the answer to the Weybridge?
Well, I mean, there's, in addition to the new HGV access, there will be existing gates that will remain open, and they are addressed in the report. So I've just been sort of finding the bits, sort of page 57, 58 sort of areas. So there are gates that will require movements across Fakenham Road, but they are a minority of movements. The Highway Authority have picked up on that in the long discussions that we've been having to get where we are today. In terms of the Weybridge itself, it's not on the site that's part of the outline or the full application. It's on the adjoining parts of the existing parts of the CRISP site. So traffic would have to move into that existing part of the site to go on the Weybridge, as I understand. Now, as part of your list of conditions that I circulated on Wednesday morning, if you go to the PF 200524, I have suggested condition 34, which is a Chris Maltings traffic management plan. And I think that would be a good way of making sure we can manage and control traffic going into the site via and using the Weybridge. So we're not expecting people to cut the corner and go to the Chris Maltings site via Fakenham Road. That's the point of the traffic regulation orders, to manage the traffic going through the village as part of this proposal. We're trying to encourage and ensure HGVs use this new road at the earliest opportunity. And that's why we're suggesting phasing plans to manage that transition to the new HGV road. So yeah, there are conditions in place that we can control this issue.
Have Chris Maltings said that they will look at the movements through the village? Because there are still some movements, aren't there? There will be some movements from the side where non-Chris Maltings lorries will be taking in barley. And that's what I think has been worrying a lot of people, the fact that the HGV movements are reduced, but not completely eliminated.
And that is reflected in the report, in the sense that Chris Maltings obviously have their own traffic that they can control through their sort of contractual arrangements with their employees and how they manage that traffic. Obviously, third-party suppliers, it's harder to always encourage everyone to do it all the time, but obviously the traffic management plan condition will make sure that those suppliers know the routes to take. I mean, sometimes sat navs can take people down roads that they weren't necessarily expecting to use, but it's about ensuring people know the routes and know the issues when they're arriving on site, and that's what a traffic management plan will make sure happens. So, and the TROs that are being proposed, they will restrict HGV movements through those villages. So, I mean, there are exemptions to that. Obviously, agricultural traffic is exempted from HGV traffic restrictions, but they're not necessarily the vehicles that are going to the CRISP site. So yeah, there are proposals to manage the traffic and to alleviate those concerns.
Yes, I did note that only HGVs would be using the new HGV road, so that other traffic will be going wherever the other entrances are.
Yeah, I mean, those conditions are still, so they're in draft form, so that the final wording is still to be agreed. It's not intended that just HGVs can use that road. We'll also encourage all traffic going to the Maltings site to use that road. So it's not necessarily exclusive just for HGV traffic.
Okay.
One of the objecting speakers asked if they could give a clarification. Well, that's at your discretion.
Could I just go through what the rest of our members, and then I'll come back to you if there's time. Councillor Heinrich.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Not an easy application to deal with, and I thank officers and the applicants for very detailed reports. I note the widespread concern in the village, but we've got dealing here with a very long established business. It predates the arrival of many residents. And yes, it would have originally been serviced by the railway line, and it was an ideal site in those days. It's less so now. However, it exists. It is a highly important business to the area. The idea that removing itself elsewhere is pie in the sky. It can't happen. We know that the Maltings expansion is essential to not only their own growth, but to agriculture across our district. its economic importance to North Norfolk and the whole county is very significant. It might not be a large employer in itself, although there are many of them are skilled jobs. But when you look at the overall employment generated on the farms from HGV drivers, farm suppliers, agricultural engineers, and way more, it is crucial to the local economy. And we have to give considerable weight to that, in my view. I do think the applicant's gone to considerable lengths to ensure that the silos and the warehouse are sited and screened as effectively as they possibly can. We just need to make sure that the trees planted are fast growing so that we can hopefully get good screening well within the 15 years. I do think the intrusion landscape is going to be mitigated by the proposals. Clearly, the key thing is the new road and the associated TRO. That can only be a good thing. It will deal with the major traffic issues. And as long as it's enforced and the times of access and so on are enforced, it will be a significant improvement, I think. Like others, I do have some concerns over the impact on the Upper Wensum. Clearly, extraction and return is covered by licenses. But we do need to be absolutely sure there will be no adverse impact. And I'm happy to see that there are conditions which will enable us to carry on negotiating on that. So I'm happier now we've had that explained. We've seen the draft conditions. This is possibly the most controversial non-residential application we've had in this committee since I've been here. It requires us to go against some of our policies, but the economic importance, I don't think, can be underestimated. And I accept the assurance of the company regarding not only the mitigations, but their approach to net zero. That is, I think, a very important part of all this. And then we have the longest set of conditions I think I've ever seen. So I think we've got every possible safeguard in place, and I'm happy to support the recommendations.
The conditions haven't been approved yet. The new conditions, it's just for us to have a look through and for them to be discussed with.
Yes, I'm aware it's a delegated decision.
Yes. And they are tremendously long. I've never seen so many before, but still, there we are. There's always a new thing in life, isn't there? Councillor Fisher. Now, I'll just stop us a minute. It's 11 o'clock. Do you want to carry on, or do you want to stop for now, or shall we carry on and just hear the rest of the members, and then we'll have a comfort break and coffee? Okay. Peter?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Most of my questions have been asked already regarding the Weybridge and the access road, but just a couple of things to do with the access road. Is this going to remain as a private road rather than being adopted by Norfolk County Council? And if so, can we guarantee the maintenance? And a third thing was that obviously at the moment, most of the traffic comes from the Stibbard direction from the east. And the road improvements that have been put in place at the junctions for the maltings will be lost, in effect, to the road coming from the east, which most of the traffic will now be on. And so is there anything envisaged in road improvements for that? And lastly, there are a number, as we drive along the road, we all know that different road surfaces make different noises, and some much louder than others. And can that be discussed in the final reckoning, please?
I think, Peter, we got slightly confused with traffic coming from the east and traffic coming from the east. So it's coming from the east, and the new road goes to the west, I think.
I think I understood what you were saying. So as you're saying that at the moment traffic comes, obviously they did quite a few improvements to the road network a few years ago, and you're saying that's would in effect be lost because now most of the traffic will be coming from sort of the Colkirk sort of direction. No, in terms of private or sort of adopted status of the road, my understanding it will remain a private road. So Highfield Lane ends, and if you're able to, Lauren, to go back to there's a highway plan that shows where Highfield Lane ends. So I just dropped that one on you. It's in the application too, so. That's one showing the detailed view of the road. Keep going up. That's it. So hopefully, I don't know if you can see, I haven't got a laser pointer, so I can't point on the screen, but there's a little sort of line showing where the pink line ends to the south. There's that's where Highfield Lane ends as a public road, and there's a turning point that's being put in there. At the minute, you can drive all the way up, but it's a private road. There's a gated access across that could be closed if people didn't want people to go up there. But it's often used by people walking their dogs in that area. But there will still be pedestrian and cycle access through, but so vehicle access will end at that point. So that's the crossing point across Highfield Lane, but it will be a private road. In terms of surfacing, I mean, there is a condition of the many conditions about construction details, and yeah, I know exactly what you're saying about road surfacing. Some can be quiet and some can be noisy. And I think we will certainly work with Chris to make sure that the road finish is as quiet as possible. Obviously, there are technical specifications to meet for HGV roads in terms of making sure they obviously withstand turning of wheels and things like that. But yeah, we can make sure that's covered in part of the conditions, that we have the quiet tarmac or whatever finishing that's going to be.
Is this permeable tarmac or whatever?
It wouldn't be permeable because that's part of the surface water scheme. The water would move over to the side and into the. There's about 2 or 3 different types of soak away across that access road, but it requires a sort of a hard finish so that water moves into those sort of drainage channels.
Right. Okay. That's in your 154 conditions, is it?
Yeah.
Thank goodness for that. Thank you. It's all right, Peter. Councillor Toy, John.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, thank you to officers for working through this and bringing this to where it is today. But I'm going to express disappointment, not from the officers, but from the applicant and perhaps the way we've paid lip service to some of the green items that have been discussed here. For example, we've got 3 parts in the report, 3 parts of the MPPF where it talks about cycling and walking. I've got loads of notes here that I made, but there's 3 areas, but it's not discussed once. We've not considered whether the old railway line could be an access path for workers to cycle from Fakenham, which is just a few miles down the road. There's no consideration to that. It's all been about where the traffic moves. There's not been about any other types of sustainable movement. We put something in, well, we plant trees to hide it. It's old school. We've got combined heat and power, and we can reduce its energy consumption. And maybe when hydro comes along, we can use that. I had a quick look online, and this will be important in a moment, but there's somewhere called Castle Maltings in Belgium, which has, it looks, if you look at it, it's just a solar panel with the factory underneath, with everything electric. So there are other ways of doing this. I get that the malt's grown in Norfolk for the climate. I get the beers, Moongazer, I would recommend it, but you know, and I get the whole infrastructure and its local nature and everything else, but no one has told me what Ryborough adds to that flavour. It could be anywhere else in North Norfolk. It could be one of our old airfields. It doesn't have to be in Ryborough to still be North Norfolk, to be the barley that it is, to supply the local people. So it's not been explained to me. We've not looked at whether Sedum roofs, putting solar panels on the other stuff. I'm going to try and wind this up because I've got so many bits to deal with this. However, if we look at their sustainability statement, I worry when it says words like Chris are considering the introduction of renewables. That Chris are in the process of replacing all standard light bulbs with LED. The gas, which I've already spoken about. The upgraded plant could include phosphate removal. It's very wishy-washy. It's not really, they claim to be doing things. They've been involved with the neighbourhood plan, and I question whether they are good neighbours. So in planning terms, we've come to something that is acceptable and would be difficult to deny that it's acceptable. But I do think that companies in North Norfolk need to look to the future, not replicate the past with a few little things that scratch at it. Their whole plan is only based on 2050, which is the government plan, nothing earlier. They're using Euro 6 vehicles. Everybody uses Euro 6 vehicles. They replace them regularly. It's not, you know, we're being sold things that actually aren't really a commitment to the future and to the environment. It's all been things that officers have had to squeeze out of them to get the attenuation to do this. And I'm not convinced that they're committed to it. So as a statement, I still can't decide where to vote because I'm really torn on this. I absolutely get the economic benefits. I absolutely get why it's here in North Norfolk and what that means. I'm not convinced this is the right way forward for Chris and for the future of this whole product and this whole scheme. And I'm going to sit on the fence for a little while longer. Thank you, Madam Chair, for letting me rant on about that. Thank you.
That's right, John. You know I like a good rant. Very fond of a good rant. Can you answer any of those questions? I do know that there are going to be solar panels on the new warehouse. That is some, but I get your thought that the could and maybe and perhaps is not saying that they're actually going to do it. Are these in your 154 conditions?
They are. There's a net zero strategy commitment requirements as part of those list of conditions, because you're right. I mean, it's about turning words into actions, and it's no good just offering a word that's hollow if you don't follow it up with actions. And that's why we've tried to secure these by condition, so actually we can turn those words into actions. You're right. There's no point making an offer if it a years down the line it suddenly drops off the agenda, and that's what we as officers and what development management team need to do, is to try and drive forward a change to development to deliver these commitments as part of future developments. So this is the first applicant in the district to commit to a net zero strategy as a condition. So on the one, I take the point that, yeah, but on the other hand, we should give the applicant credit that they are trying to do something about it. So it's not that there's nothing being done. It's just that we need to make sure we turn the offers and the possibles into we will have those. And that's why we want to secure those conditions to deliver it.
Just a minute, John. What about this other system of other forms of transport, like bike riding and such like? That's not considered in this application at all?
I mean, we haven't necessarily focused on how people get to work, because I mean it's always a challenge, because you can't always predict where people will live that will then work at the Ryber sites. There's no guarantee that people working at Ryber all live at Fakenham that would use that cycle track. So yes, by all means, we could ask the applicant to provide it if they could afford to do so, but would that actually in reality deliver the benefits that you're trying to achieve? And actually it might impact greater impact laying tarmac for a cycle route than it would actually through people saving carbon through not using their car. So yeah, I take the point, but is it reasonable? Would you refuse the applicant permission if they hadn't provided that point? And that's kind of where I think, yes, it's nice to have the aims, but actually, can you justify that request for this particular scheme? And that's why we haven't pushed on that point.
Right, John, I'll allow you to come back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, no, I absolutely congratulate you for getting us here and for getting that across the line. I just think that we need to go further and the offers need to be bigger rather than you trying to squeeze out as much as you can from the offer. So that's the point I was trying to make with that. And the fact that it's in the report 3 times, it mentions the NPPF 104, 110 and 112, where it talks about that needs to be considered and it's not been considered in the report. There should have been something in the report for me that says we've looked at this, but it's not something that is doable in Ryborough. I just felt that, you know, they've looked at whether we could work with bus companies to supply more buses. It talks about it in the report. There is nothing in there that says that we've actually tried to deal with those particular aspects.
Okay.
So thank you.
Officer Rowson, do you wish to speak now?
Just really an overarching point which Jeff may choose to add to further. This isn't for officers and members to debate in isolation in this chamber together. So I'm conscious. I just want to make a simple overarching point. Planning policy is a matter of balance. It is a matter where we are being asked to consider a number of issues that relate to this particular proposal today. However, planning policy will take you so far, and it is entirely appropriate for planning policy to relate to decisions that are made today. We don't know what the government will introduce through the levelling up paper in the spring of this year. We can only predict what that would be. If we make decisions today on what we think will be in the levelling up paper and we refuse or approve applications, we will be wrong in doing that. We have to make the decisions on the basis of the planning balance as it stands today. So my point is not about what may be in the future. My point is very simply, we have to make our planning balance on what is acceptable today. We may want more as officers and members, but we have to make decisions which are difficult decisions, which cross the line in terms of acceptability at the time that this decision is made, not at the time in the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That's it. Thank you, John. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, extremely complex on both sides. Whichever decision is made, it's going to cause anger and resentment on the other side. So what do we got? We've got a village that is in the heart of an agricultural county. And this business has come up because it's agricultural. It now wants to expand because of its success. And obviously people are frightened. So maybe there is, even though they've done a great report from the officers, etc., there's more information that probably will definitely have to be communicated. And obviously to hopefully put greater union. I look at the photographs, if I go to the agenda on page 92 of the lorries in the village, that is a sign of a growing business in a village that is a small village and wants to remain a small village. And I note the points as regards other access and transport options. I think what we've got here is, and congratulations to you, Jeff, 154 conditions is a first step to go forward. I think there's going to be a lot more that's going to be added. And it's a project that we've got, obviously, we'll be looking at both sides to get the best out of it. I look at the economic benefits. I believe passionately, I'll have to support it. So I'll support it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nigel. And finally, but not least, Victoria. Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst understanding the positive impacts of the agribusiness to our economy, I do feel the adverse impacts on residential amenity and landscape and ecology are understated in this report. And I think the economic benefits are overstated. And as far as the highway is concerned, I feel rather sorry for Hempton if they're going to be receiving all the lorries from this redirection. And I'm not comfortable going against local plan policies. It's not a place I want to be. And I don't see why sustainability is predicated on expansion here and could get more sustainable without needing to expand the business. So that's my position. Thank you very much. I think we should listen more to residents and care more about the environment and our landscape. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Mrs. Bassett, you were asked if you could speak. Just very quickly, please, if you would come up. This is very unusual, but this is such an important application Now you're answering, I've even forgotten what we were asking, but. Okay. Right, if you'd like to turn that on then, please.
So the Chris Maltings applications and the planning officer's document refer to the construction of a new relief road designed to avoid factory vehicles travelling through the village. You will be aware of Highway Agency's statement that the weighbridge and loading hoppers are currently located in the middle of the village, adjacent to the Memorial Hall. And as there is no link between these and the new road, all HGVs must journey along this inadequately narrow C-class road. In order to transfer these vehicles onto the new relief road and away from the village as planned, the weighbridge and hopper functions must be relocated to the northern elevation of the expanding factory so that they do not enter and exit the factory on this new road. So in essence, in simplicity, if the hoppers and the weighbridge are not relocated, the HGVs will continue to use the current route through the village and not the new proposed road, as the weighbridge will not be sited in a convenient place for their use. Many thanks.
Thank you. We seem to be drifting from our normal procedures in our applications, in our meetings, but I have been asked if Chris Maltings can answer that query. Mr. Sands, if you'd like to come back up. Then I think this is the end. We will then go to our votes and a cup of coffee.
Thank you. I walked along the village road the other day and met the trucks coming and going from the plant. I walked into the field as well. It is critically important for us to ensure that we are a good neighbour in the village. We do not want HGVs in the village. And as we walked around the back of the field, we understood the pathway that will allow the trucks to come in through the new access road up by the side of the site. And it will come through the existing warehouse and the proposed new warehouse to access the weighbridge. And it will be our intent that that is the access road for trucks to the weighbridge. And then in the long term, as we move forward, we want to make our plant as efficient as possible and would potentially relocate the weighbridge down once the new maltings are constructed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sands. Right, we will now go to our vote. Now we're going to, because they're intertwined, we're going to do the proposal application 2 first, PO 200524. This is the hybrid application for creation of the HGV access road to serve an expanded Chris Maltings Group site. Now you've seen all the, I hope you have read all the new conditions that came through, winging their way through yesterday. So we have a proposer to accept this application, to approve it, from Councillor Kershaw, seconded by Councillor Withington. And I pass to Lauren now for a roll call. If for, against, abstain. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Brown?
For.
Councillor Fisher?
For.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett?
For.
Councillor Grove-Jones?
For.
Councillor Heinrich?
For.
Councillor Holiday?
Against.
Councillor Kershaw?
For.
Councillor Mancini-Boyle?
For.
Councillor Pearce? Councillor Toy?
For.
Councillor Varley?
For.
Councillor Withington?
For.
That is 11 votes for and 1 against. The vote is carried.
This vote is carried. Thank you. We now go to the second vote, which is PF 200523. This was application 1. This is for the construction of the 15 grain silos and 1 60,000 square foot warehouse with associated drainage access and external lighting. The recommendation is approval. The proposer stands as Richard Kershaw, seconded by Liz Withington. The recommendation conditions are again we saw yesterday, they've been expanded. So if we could now go to the vote, please, Lauren.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Brown,
For.
Councillor Fisher,
For.
Councillor Fitch Tillett,
For.
Councillor Grove Jones,
For.
Councillor Heinrich,
For.
Councillor Holiday, Councillor Kershaw,
For.
Councillor Mancini Boyle,
For.
Councillor Pearce,
For.
Councillor Toy,
For.
Councillor Varley, and Councillor Whittington.
For.
That's 11 votes for, 1 against. The vote is carried.
Vote is carried. Thank you very much, everybody. This has been a difficult one, but very interesting. And I'd like to thank Jeff and his team for a really, really good report. And it took him hours and hours. It took me hours and hours to read the blooming thing, never mind write it. So thank you. We're now going to have a 10-minute break. And I should like you back here at 11:30. Thank you. recommended well, they were here.
We're now live.
Thank you very much. And we now go to page 195. PF 213227, Wells Next the Sea, two-story extension. And I'm going to ask Officer Watson to present the report.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This is a proposal for 2 units of holiday accommodation to be formed by extensions to an existing detached garage and a new single-storey building. There's nothing to add to the report, but I just run through the main points. Planning permission was refused for a similar proposal in June last year. The reasons for refusal are on page 195 of the agenda. As you will note, these reasons related to the large areas of glazing on Unit 1, which it was felt would result in light pollution to the detriment of the AONB, and the concerns relating to Unit 2 were its height, scale and proposed materials. This current application has sought to address these reasons for refusal. The reasons explained in the report, it is considered that following further revisions, the proposal before you has now satisfactorily addressed the previous reasons for refusal, being acceptable in terms of its effect on the character and appearance of the area, landscape, and including the AONB. As with the previous application, the proposed development is considered acceptable with regards to its effect on the living conditions of neighbours and also highway safety and parking. The proposed development is, however, contrary to policies SS1, SS2 and EC7, as the site is within the area designated as countryside, as is explained in the officer appraisal in respect of the principle on pages 198 and 199 of the agenda. Notwithstanding this, there are a number of specific reasons in this case why the proposal is considered to be acceptable in this respect. In particular, the conflict with these policies was not a reason for refusal of the previous application, and as such, it is therefore reasonable to assume it was considered acceptable. As the applicant has stated, there's been no change in the planning circumstances since then, which would indicate the proposal is no longer acceptable in principle. They have simply sought to address the reasons for refusal previously. These matters aside, this site is well related to the existing built-up part of the town, which is designated as a secondary settlement. It lies only 60 metres outside of the settlement boundary and is within easy walking distance of the town centre. It is also within the coastal tourism asset zone. For these reasons, it is considered that there will be no significant harm to the aims of these policies in approving this application. Approval of the application is therefore recommended with conditions to cover the matters listed on page 207, I think. If members have any queries in relation to the presentation, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Presentation.
Thank you. Have we gone through all the, no. Can we start those views again? Because we seem to be going all over the place here, just to give us an idea. So we'll go to the first one, please, Lauren.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that just shows the application site and the general location. It's an L-shaped site. The existing dwelling is roughly where the end of the line is, where it states application site, and you can see its relationship to the existing built-up area. Can we go to the next slide? That's the site location plan, which shows the site in a little bit more detail. It's on the very eastern edge of Wells. Next slide, please. And that's looking at on the aerial photo. Next one, please. And that is just to show you the relationship of the site with the settlement boundary. The sort of yellowy amber colour is the area designated as countryside. So the actual settlement boundary runs along the line of the former railway. Thank you. That just shows the site plan. Unit 1 is the extended garage that sits on the eastern boundary of the site, and Unit 2 is a new single-storey unit on the western side. The the footprint outlined in red is the existing dwelling marsh tide. Access to unit 1 would be off Northfield Lane, and then unit 2 there's a track that runs along the western boundary of the site, and there's would be an access off there where there's one at present. Next, that just shows the existing elevations. That the building on the left hand side is the detached garage that would be extended above and to the side, and the building to the right is the existing dwelling. Next one. That's just looking at the same view as the view from the west. You can see the garage on the right hand side of that image. And that's just the north and south elevations as existing. That shows the proposed eastern elevation that is facing towards the open land beyond the boundary of the site to the east. The building on the left-hand side is the garage as it would be extended. That on the right is the existing dwelling. That shows the north and south elevations of the extended garage, with the image on the right-hand side is the detail of the proposed timber cladding. And that's looking at the western elevations. That's largely unseen from public vantage point because of the existing boundary fence and the sort of setback from the track that runs to the west. That's just showing the proposed floor plan. So the garage would be extended to the side at ground floor level, and then with a first floor extension going over the garage and over the new ground floor extension. That's looking at the elevation, the eastern elevation of unit 2. That's the new build unit on the western part of the site. So the north elevation is the left hand one, and the east is the right hand one. The east would face towards the existing dwelling. That's looking at the west elevation, which would face towards the track on the western side. There's an existing high boundary fence along there at the moment, and then the image on the left is the proposed south elevation. That's just the floor plan of unit 2. It's only a single story unit. And this is just looking at the there's a number of views of the site. This is looking at the existing access to the dwelling from Northfield Lane, which after the end of Northfield Road continues as a roughly surface track which serves allotments and a number of other dwellings, and beyond it just runs across a field. So on the left hand image you can see the existing dwelling marsh tide, and then the garage with the pyramid roof, and that's what would be extended. Thank you. That's looking at the site for unit 2. It would the existing dark brown boundary fence is the site boundary, and it would sit behind there, and you can see the existing dwelling marsh tide sort of on the left of the left hand image, and in roughly in the centre of the right hand image. That's looking at the site from the east. You can see the existing dwelling marsh tide and the garage and its relationship to the existing dwelling. That's from looking across from the track that runs beyond the end of Northfield Lane. There's some further views. That's the rear elevation of marsh tide. You don't get that view from standing in the street. I've lifted the camera up to take that. And that's the right hand image is a longer view eastwards along Northfield Lane. So you can just about see the roof of the garage there. The earlier photo was taken from just in front of the access to marsh tide. And these are the extracts from the previously refused scheme, showing the glazing on the eastern elevation, which faces towards the open area to the east. So I just put that in for some context. And the bottom one shows the proposed west elevation to to Unit 2. That's the end of the presentation, other than the list of the main issues and the recommendation. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Darryl. I now go to speakers. We have, I understand, no objecting speaker, no parish speaker. Is that right? No parish, no objector, but we do have a supporting speaker, Dr. Michelle Lyon. If you'd like to come up, please. You have 3 minutes, Dr. Lyon. No.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm the agent for the application. Following the refusal for the previous application, the applicants approached me to overcome the design reasons for refusal in that case. And as they only related to design, it indicated that all other matters were acceptable, and therefore the task of the current application was to address those two design reasons for refusal. So in doing that, the scheme has been revised. The building in the garden is now lower in height and reduced in footprint from the previous scheme. We've also set it back further from the site boundary to further reduce the visibility from outside the site. The unit above the garage now has significantly less glass in both the roof and the elevations. This limits window openings as much as possible whilst retaining sufficient light in and views out from that building. Both buildings have now been reclad in a material that's in keeping with the existing dwelling. So on that basis and the basis that all other matters were considered acceptable at the time of the previous decision last year, it is hoped that this application can now be approved. Sometime after the application was submitted, GI RAMS was brought in and Natural England issued their nutrient neutrality letter. The applicants have paid their GI RAMS fee, and obviously we now have the benefit that this is in a location where tourist accommodation can be approved without significant detriment to protected sites within the district. And the site, whilst technically outside the settlement limit, it is within the built-up area of Wells. It is within the curtilage of the existing house. It doesn't extend the built form beyond locations where there's existing residential development. There's no objection to it from the Highway Authority, and you can walk to the range of services and facilities in Wells as easily from this site as you can from the very nearby properties within the settlement boundary. The materials are now, and the scale of the building are now in keeping with the existing house and other development on the site. The applicants are in full agreement with the recommendation of approval, obviously, and they're happy with all the conditions that have been put forward as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lyon. If you'd like to go and sit down again. I now go to the local member, Councillor Fisher. Peter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Darryl, for your report. I know members will have noted that the new town councillors or members of the public here to speak against this application. However, this is a consequence of timing rather than a lack of inclination or disinterest. In fact, I've had quite a number of representations regarding this application. This proposal is for a new build tourist accommodation, and as such it must however comply with policy EC7, which requires such accommodation to be within the principal settlements. The policy also states that proposals for new build underserviced holiday accommodation in the countryside, as is this case, are treated as though they are permanently residential dwellings, and these are not permitted. The proposal is therefore contrary to SS1, SS2 and EC7. The previous application, 0690, drew the response from Wells Town Council that the application was outside the town boundary. But the application was refused by the officer. Firstly, Unit 2 by reason of height and scale, and also external materials failing to comply with EN4. Secondly, the large area of glass in Unit 1, would create light pollution, as fully explained on page 195 of the officer's report. This new application, PF 21-3227, sought to address these issues alone. Wells Town Council again responded to PF 22-3227 by noting that the application was outside the town boundary. At no time does it appear that this fact was a matter of discussion between the applicant and officers. It does seem to me counterintuitive that the very fact that we haven't discussed it cannot be then used on this new application. It's been put to me that because this fact that being outside the town boundary was not a reason for refusal, it is considered that introducing it as a reason now would be unreasonable and inconsistent. I disagree. Wales Next to Sea has a very high percentage of holiday lets, one of the highest in the area. It does seem very strange that the very thing that the town does not need more of makes it possible to build on this site, and that weight should be given for the perceived need for holiday houses against building in the countryside. I would also draw your attention to the consultation starting on page 196 and the objections of the landscape officer and the Norfolk Coast Partnership. Also, the AONB does not fully support the application. Highways do not object, even though the plot is at the very eastern end of Northfield Lane on a narrow unmade section where walkers use the track to access the path into the countryside. Northfield Lane is often the subject of holiday vehicles parking and obstructing accesses for local residents. Wales Next to Sea has a vast amount of holiday accommodation, and in my opinion, and many residents' opinion, does not need more. We also need to protect the area of outstanding natural beauty, and these boundaries are being blurred and eroded, whether by bricks and mortar or light and noise. And this is without reference to the scale of Unit 1 and the overcrowding of the whole site. I will be voting against this proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. I now go to the members, and Councillor Fitch-Tillett would like to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good morning, everybody. I have to say I've got a couple of questions and then I've got a couple of comments. Going back to presentation, the glazing on the east elevation of Unit 2, I think is far too much glass. You have to bear in mind that this is part of a migratory path for our wildfowl. And quite frequently, when they see these large glass spaces, they just go straight into them. It's really quite concerning. The other thing, I've been looking through this and time again, I don't see any reference to flood zones. I think it's probably high enough to be outside the flood zone, but bearing in mind in 2013, the water came round the back in Wells. Have we got any information on that, please, Darryl? I'm sorry, you're looking a bit blank.
I can check the flood zone for you. If you
It would be helpful if
just
you
bear with
could,
me.
please. You could probably find it while we're talking. Obviously, I have to declare that I am the Vice Chairman of the Norfolk Coast Partnership. I'm supporting the comments of our landscape officer and obviously staff at the Coast Partnership. And I want to just take you into the third paragraph on page 197. The AONB is afforded protection as a nationally designated site. And in line with paragraph 172, development needs to conserve and enhance. Now, we are a member of that partnership, Madam Chairman, and I do not consider that this is conserving or enhancing our area of outstanding natural beauty. As the local member has quite clearly stated, and it's in the report, it is outside the development boundary, and I propose it should be refused on those grounds.
Thank you, Councillor Fitch-Tillett. Did you expect a reply from Darryl at this point, or would a written reply be?
If you can find it, that's fine. If you can't, don't worry.
I'm almost there, Chair.
Well, can we pass on to councillor Barley then, whilst we're waiting for you?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First of all, I'd just like to thank the officer for the substantial report. I do just have a query, and I'd like a clarification, if possible, on the conclusion and planning balance section. It states here that the previous application and obviously indeed this application is contrary to policies SS1, SS2 and E7. EC7. So I can't speak this morning, Madam Chairman. But the application was not refused on these policies. Can I just get clarification of why that was and why this application indeed is not being refused on those policies? Is it the case that you believe these to be somewhat insignificant or holding less weight when compared to other policies? Can I just get clarification on that point, please?
I wasn't a case officer for the previous application. I've just taken this one over at the end. These policies are significant. They're probably the most important, SS1 and SS2, because they sort of relate to the location of development. As I've said in the report, it wasn't a reason for refusal previously. If the applicants had chosen to appeal that decision, introducing new reasons would probably have been frowned upon by the planning inspectorate if they had chosen to go down that route. So there is that consideration. And because of the site's very close proximity to the settlement boundary for Wells and its easy access to the town centre, we don't, given the specific circumstances in this case, we don't feel it harms the aims of those policies.
I think Officer Rowson would like to say something here.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's important to support our case officer. That's why I'm here today. That's why I popped in to attend. The case today is reported to you as a departure from planned policy for those specific reasons. It is outside of the zone where this sort of development would normally be accepted in principle. So as a departure from policy, we need to consider the materiality of the issues that are raised. We look at the distance away from services. We look at its impact in terms of the location, in terms of the surrounding buildings in the area. There are clearly, as you've seen from the development proposal, there are buildings in and around this area. You can see that it is in a location which is easily walkable, cyclable to the town centre. Wells itself is a service centre. The location in terms of planning policy is recognised as a location where there are coastal services in terms of visitor attractions. It isn't always as simple, Chairman, to simply draw a line on a map and say thou shalt not pass. We have to consider departures. You know that, Chairman, our members know that. We need to look at the materiality of the reasons to depart. Now, in terms of considerations in an appeal, it may well be unreasonable to raise a matter at a later stage, having made a refusal earlier. That does not necessarily mean that the council shouldn't consider the matter, or may even decide that that would be a consideration in any refusal. What that would mean, Chairman, members, is that we may be considered unreasonable because we didn't raise it earlier. And at that point, an applicant or appellant could appeal for costs against the council because it is an issue that wasn't previously raised when the application was refused. And you can see clearly the applicants have worked very hard to overcome the issues that were materially raised under the previous refusal. Hopefully that gives you some clarification. If not, members, I'll be very happy to take any further queries or questions. The officer's recommendation is clear. The reason to depart from policy, I believe, is similarly clear in the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Yes, wish you can.
Yeah, in answer to Councillor Fitzgerald's question about flood zone, it's in flood zone 1. It's not in the high risk flooding areas, flood zones 2 and 3. So the flood zone 1 is the lowest risk.
And does that take into account sea level rise?
Yeah, yes, yeah, I could show you the map, but it's on I've got it on my screen. I can't display it on the presentation.
Great report, but I'm a little disappointed that wasn't picked up in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, ma'am. Despite Officer Rowson's reassurances, I'm not comfortable with departing from policies, and the fact we missed them out last time, or they weren't considered last time, rather, I correct myself. That doesn't mean we shouldn't consider them this time. There's also the point about the sequentiality of preferred sites, and that doesn't seem to have been covered in this. And I agree with Councillor Fitzgerald about the glazing and the A1B position. And I'd also like to make a point that when we're talking about glazing in the A1B, we should be thinking about reduced visible light transmission as they do in other national parks. And I think we should have an absolute requirement that any vertical glazing is 0.65 VLT and any roof lights are 0.5 VLT. And I can't see that mentioned here. And I think we should be considering that, but I'm hoping we won't get that far. Thank you.
Darryl, do we know anything about that? No. No, yes, Philip.
Thank you, Chairman. The policies that relate to light transmission are noted in the officer report. We don't have those specific policies within the body of our supplementary planning guidance. We may choose to move in that area, but we are putting our policy development behind delivering our local plan, as members of the Working Party will be aware currently. So as I spoke earlier on another matter, we need to determine on the basis of our planning policy as it stands today, on the basis of the MPPF and on the basis of national guidance. And so from that point of view, I would suggest from the light implications, light shed from these proposals, that the officer report has considered those issues. I would not necessarily say that the officers hadn't previously considered the locational issue or the departure, simply that as the reasons for refusal did not include those elements and the decision was delegated, that the officer may reasonably be considered to have felt that these proposals were appropriate when making that recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I first of all support Councillor Fitzgerald's points that it's in the countryside or outside the boundary. I am a little disappointed that what was picked up or wasn't picked up in the past hasn't been addressed again, because I, in the past, have also supported odd projects that have been in the countryside, and they've been rejected because they're in the countryside. We either have consistency or we don't. And as this is quite vociferously stated, that it's in the area of our outstanding natural beauty, and one of our core principles is to protect our beauty and our heritage. So sorry, I'll vote against it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Troy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The question about the windows, what's to prevent 3-5 years down the line the windows being replaced for something bigger? Is there conditions put in the normal process, or is that something we can consider to ensure that, having got them reduced, that we at least keep them down to that?
There is a condition recommended with withdraw PD rights for additional windows and roof lights in the eastern elevation of the unit that would adjoin the eastern boundary, Unit 1.
Okay, and if I go again, thank you. Question of overdevelopment of the site. How do we decide whether it's overdevelopment or not? Because it feels like overdevelopment to me, but there must be some measurements that you apply to that enable you to decide that.
Well, it's a judgment looking at the sort of the overall site coverage of buildings, but I just refer to the fact that it wasn't a reason for refusal previously, and the scale of Unit 1 has been reduced. Unit 2, sorry, the one on the western side has been reduced.
Okay, no, that's fine. Thank you.
I must say that this has come up before with regard to overcrowding on the site, and it is just a question of looking at the site and seeing whether it's sensible or not. And parking is usually one of the things. I think that came up in the first one with the parking of vehicles, but there we go. It's a question of whether you like it or not. Councillor Heinrich.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I always have trouble with the rather arbitrary boundaries between existing built up and countryside. Clearly, this particular site lies within an area that has a number of buildings on it. It's not countryside as I would interpret countryside, or even on the fringe of an open meadow, except for that, well, apart from behind it, but it's not extending into that area. It's within the curtilage of the existing building. So I don't have a problem there. Whether it's overcrowding or not on the site, over the front of the site, is a matter of personal opinion, I think. I think on balance, it's not, given the scale of the buildings around it. As to additional holiday accommodation, I'd far rather see purpose-built holiday accommodation than residential property taken over by the Airbnb mob. So I think there is some gain in having the purpose-built. So on balance, I can accept it, and I will propose acceptance of the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Have I a seconder for that, please, for this proposal? Councillor Whittington. We've all spoken now. We'll go to the vote then. So the proposer recommendation is to approve with the conditions as stated on page 201. We have a proposer, Councillor Heinrich, to accept, seconded by Councillor Whittington. Can we go to the vote, please?
Councillor Brown?
Against.
Councillor Fisher?
Against.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett?
Against.
Councillor Grove-Jones? For. Councillor Heinrich?
For.
Councillor Holiday?
Yes.
Councillor Kershaw?
For.
Councillor Mancini-Boyle?
For.
Councillor Pearce?
Against.
Councillor Toy?
For.
Councillor Varley?
For.
Councillor Whittington?
For.
7 votes for and 5 against. The vote is carried.
Thank you. Thank you, members. It is difficult sometimes, you know. But I think we can have a good conversation about that. There will be about these various things. Thank you. Now we go to the next proposals, which are the TPOs. Sorry, Imogen, we kept you waiting, my love. See if we can get through these very quickly. You all right with all of this so far? It is. Right. We now go to the first TPO, which is TPO 220994 on page 203. Land rear of 5 Pearson's Close, and Officer Mole will now present. This is in Holt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee. Good afternoon, everybody.
Can we just stop for a moment whilst he brings us lunch? Oh, no, we haven't eaten lunch yet. Sorry, right, okay.
Right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you. So the first TPO is to consider the ongoing protection of a sycamore tree. It was initially served in 2021, but there are, should we say, a lack of records about that TPO at the time. So my role was to review the order and to see whether we still wanted to preserve this sycamore tree. Thank you, Lauren. And here we are at the site. It's sort of in the back of the property at Pearson's Close, but very close to the properties on Ainsworth Road. It's on the east side of Holt. Thank you. And here we have an aerial view just to sort of get a context of what's around the tree. We're in domestic gardens here. but you can see it's quite a large canopy tree. There has been some representations for the ongoing preservation order. There has also been representations of objection, and they are detailed in the report. I'm happy to go through those if you want. But you can see it does have a wider visibility, and it's certainly well regarded in the gardens there. There's been a lot of strong feeling about retaining and preserving this tree. So the residents at Ainsworth are social housing, and the owner is actually Places for People. We've been working well with the arboricultural manager of the social housing to facilitate tree work. And you can see on the first picture there, some stubs were left. That was because the work was halted. There was nesting birds found in the tree, and that's the right thing to do to stop, wait till we're at a better time of the year and to carry on. So it's my understanding that work to reduce the canopy back from those gardens at Ainsworth will be completed on the 25th of November. And so really what we're considering here is the sycamore has been reassessed. It is important. Our feelings are that, you know, it does have that amenity value, and in the street scene there are few large mature trees, and I know sycamore trees aren't everybody's favourite species of tree, but you know, we have had a lot of reports of, you know, really interesting biodiversity, nesting birds. It is important. Our feeling is to retain this tree. So I'm happy to answer any questions. We've got some other bits and pieces that have been submitted since the order was served, but I think outside of the time for official ongoing communication.
Thank you, Imogen. Now we have no parish speaker about this. We've had no objecting speakers, no supporting speakers. Do we know who the local member is for Hull for this one?
We haven't had a submission from the local member.
Who is it? Right, we've had nothing through from that. Right, okay. Well, then we'll go to members. Did you want to speak, Victoria?
I can speak. I was going to say, actually,
Well, I thought you were going like that.
I think Holt's a rather ungreen town, actually, and it needs all the trees it can have, quite frankly. And this part of Holt particularly, which I know quite well, so I'd be in favour of it.
You're in favour, yes, Philip.
For members' benefit, I need to thank Imogen for picking this case up, and thank you, Imogen, for coming to your first development committee today.
Yes.
Much appreciated.
Very nice to see you.
Imogen is our new ARB officer, and I'm sure you'll all welcome her if you've not already spoken with her. In this matter, the council were minded to serve a TPO on this tree some little time ago. The TPO was never confirmed. There was an ongoing complaint on the matter from a local resident who is very concerned about the implications of having a large mature tree next door to their home. Part of that is obviously being considered within representations that you see before you today, but I think Imogen's report is very clear in terms of the reason to bring forward the TPO. It does carry amenity benefits to the wider public realm. I would also say that I believe personally that TPOs themselves are a force for good in terms of tree management. And I'm delighted to hear the positive exchanges that Imogen has had with the Housing Association about the management of this tree in the future. I think that those issues were at the root of the local concerns relating to this tree and its proximity. I think over the years it had just been a very poorly managed tree. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Gerard? And then Angie, and then Nigel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is very easy for me. The tree's clearly been maintained. And frankly, I think we've had this conversation before. The tree was there before the houses. So when they built the houses, they knew the tree was there. So I think it'd be a crime if it was chopped down just for the sake of somebody getting a bit more light. And poor old birds, they've got nowhere else to go, have they? So I completely, I'm supporting this.
Thank you. Are you proposing we support this then? Yeah. That's proposed by Councillor Mancini Moyle. Councillor Fitch-Tillett.
Yeah, it's obvious we must keep it. I think Jared's actually summed it up very well. The tree was here first. And really, don't we just know it? Will people just not look around when they buy the deputies, and I'm happy to second the recommendation.
Thank you. That's seconded by Councillor Fitch-Tillett. Well, we've said this time and time again, haven't we? Why buy somewhere in the countryside if you don't like trees? Plenty of places in towns. Well, it is a town, but I mean a big town. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a quickie, I'll come the other side. If you look at the photographs for the tree photos in the report, the one there with the tree towering over the houses explains it all. I think it's also a valuable community asset for the wider community, because you can look at that and you do get a splash of green. There's life there. And let's hope that the tree preservation order makes sure that it's healthily maintained for the future. Thank you.
I agree with you. I lived in London for a long time. And I used to have green starvation, you know, because you just never saw, and light pollution was just right. Anyway, can we go to a vote then, please, Lauren?
Yep, certainly. Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett. For. Councillor Grove-Jones. For. Councillor Heinrich.
For.
Councillor Holiday. For. Councillor Kershaw.
For.
Councillor Mancini-Boyle.
For.
Councillor Pearce.
For.
Councillor Toy.
For.
Councillor Varley.
For.
And Councillor Withington.
Councillor
Oh,
Withington,
she's disappeared now. That's unanimous then.
unanimous. Thank you. Right, Imogen, let's go on to TPO 220993. And again, we have no support, no objecting or supporting speakers. We have no parish, no town council speaker. We've got a local member. Are you the local member? Virginia. So she's sent her. Would you? Well, you can read it out. Whoever.
Do you want Imogen to do her report first?
Yes, the report first.
Oh.
You do the report presentation first.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I completely forgotten. I'm so eager to get these trees through. Right. Sorry, Imogen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, councillors. So the next tree preservation order that we're proposing is at the land at Long Barrow Drive. And here we can see the area that we propose to become permanently woodland. It's on the southern tip of the development that was known in the 90s as the land off Thirlby Road. So this development happened in the early 90s, and as part of the condition of the development, this landscape buffer strip was proposed and planted to aid the visual transition into the countryside. So it creates that buffer zone where south of here it's very open fields until we meet sort of Meeting Hill area. And I think it's fair to say that we've had quite a lot of representations for this proposed order. Over the last 20 years, there has been, I think, a perceived lack of maintenance, which I detailed in the report. Our countryside team are now managing the woodland buffer strip. There continues to be an ongoing dialogue, I think is fair to say, about concerns with the trees establishing into and across boundaries, becoming very high. So you can see that it's still quite young planted. They're still in quite distinct rows. There's a mixture of species, native species, and the residents have in places taken trees out without the authorities' permission. And you can see that you know, those paths are being mowed through the woodland area, but that is actually quite a big departure from how the residents have been managing the land. They have obviously had a much maybe neater approach. Some hedges have been taken out, swings, play equipment, things put in, and then equally you've had some quite nice biodiversity improvements with you know, bird boxes, hedgehog houses, things like that. So you know, the trees you can see some have been felled. You can see the stumps there, and there are trees that are in close proximity to the houses. There's no sort of disputing that. But really what we want to see is the countryside team supported, so that, you know, they're not having this ongoing dialogue where trees in some areas have more pressure to be removed, that we have a consistent standard of work and approach to the management of the woodland. the order will allow the residents to have a mechanism of getting that work done. So if the work is appropriate in terms of the countryside management team's objectives, but we wouldn't necessarily be attending those trees, say this year, there would be a mechanism for the residents to apply for this work with the tree work application, with our approved contractor. It's all online, so that gives them a way to do things that's above board. So I think it's important that that buffer strip is there. It was planted for a reason, and it's got all those benefits of, you know, wildlife, biodiversity, screening, and that's why we think we should continue with this preservation order.
Imogen, have you informed the residents that are behind this
Yes.
woodland area that this TPO is being applied for, and therefore they cannot go in with their chainsaw and chop down a tree for firewood?
Absolutely. We've had quite a lot of correspondence back, raising concerns. Yeah, there's been quite a lot of backwards and forwards and additional comments made, which again, I can, you know, let the members have additional queries about, you know, who owns the strip, what's going to happen, why are they being left to grow so
It's
poorly.
a shame we left it for so long.
Absolutely.
Which is what we said, isn't it?
Yeah,
19 or 20 years with us not doing anything. You can't blame people going in and suddenly saying, oh, this looks a mess. Thank you. So the local member is Virginia. Now you've got her. Would you like to read it out, Paul? Yeah.
Yeah, this is the statement from Councillor Gay. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm extremely sorry as I'm not with you this morning to send a committee deliberation in the matter of the Long Barrow Road tree protection order. I do know this piece of mixed woodland. I visited it on several occasions and I've read the report carefully. This area was intended to form a soft wooded boundary to our town. It is my understanding that it emerged as part of the original planning application for the Long Barrow Drive area. While it was indeed neglected for many years, North Norfolk District Council's countryside team is committed to its maintenance, and with the cooperation of residents, it has in the last few years introduced schedules for this. There is now a proper regime in place to ensure that trees are examined for safety at regular intervals. We're among the least biodiverse countries in Europe. Biodiversity is important to the district's emerging local plan. We are committed to a serious programme of tree planting. It should be important to us to protect trees which we already have. This is why I hope that you will decide to confirm the recommendation for a tree protection order at Long Barrow Drive. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We now go to members, and the first member wishes to speak is Councillor Kershaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What a pleasure to see such a concise and comprehensive report. Thank you. We have to, yeah, this makes absolute sense. It's really good to see that our countryside team are now going to maintain this. It's for the benefits of the residents, and I propose acceptance so that we confirm this tree order.
Right, you're proposing.
Quite happy to second that.
And you'd like to second that, Councillor Brown? Councillor Fisher.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. I'm assuming that the land, the buffer strip, was owned individually by the houses adjacent.
It's not, it's owned by North Norfolk District Council.
Right, well, that poses a question. They need to be paying for their firewood. No, what I was going to say was, just got up there. Yeah. What I was thinking was, do we not put a TPO on to a buffer area like this when we decide upon the planning?
Well, we should have done, but we didn't.
Is it just an oversight?
Well, I don't.
Or would that be normal?
I can see a little hand waving there. Yes.
I'm going to try some mind reading here. And I press my button first. Shouldn't be so impetuous. Chairman, generally speaking, a TPO on council-owned land is normally not required because the council is taken to be a good custodian. We don't chop trees down. We manage the land appropriately, we think. And I'm hoping I'm saying the same things that Imogen might otherwise say. So it's extremely rare for a TPO to be on the council-owned land. Thank you.
Thank you. Does that answer your query? Thank you. Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you for your report this morning. Buffer strips are so significant in instances such as these, and I think the TPA will only be a positive aspect of this to ensure that they're protected and well maintained. So more than happy to support this.
Thank you. And Councillor Heinrich.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, as most members know, I live in Silby Road, so I'm somewhat familiar with this area. Yeah, there are various concerns along the road. I've had put to me, some people clearly do not like a tree overhanging their garden. Well, why did you buy it? Others abuse it and try and take it into their own gardens, gain a bit of extra space. The majority of comments are in favour of having it properly maintained, and that's what this will do. And I fully support everything that's been said by Imogen and others. So
thank you. So now we go to a vote with the proposer to accept that this order be confirmed from Councillor Kershaw, seconded by Councillor Brown. Can we go to the vote, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Fisher.
For.
Councillor Fitch-Tillett. For. Councillor Grove-Jones. For. Councillor Heinrich.
For.
Councillor Holiday. For. Councillor Kershaw.
For.
Councillor Mancini Boyle.
For.
Councillor Pearce. For. Councillor Toy.
For.
And Councillor Varley.
For.
That is unanimous, 11 votes for.
Thank you very much. We now go to the final TPO request, which is TPO 220995, land east of 19 Rosewood and west of 6 Valley Gardens. Again, we have no town or parish council speaker, no objector, no supporter, but we do have a local member, Paul. Oh, and excuse me, I've done it again. Oh, I'm so sorry, Imogen. This is baptism by fire, I think it's called. Please give a report.
Thank you very much, Chair. Finally, this proposed confirmation is to protect one oak tree. This was brought to our attention. Some residents had very strong feelings that the tree was going to be, well, was in the process of being arranged to be removed. So we had a quick undertaking of, is it still there? What sort of health is it in? Just preliminary looks. And yeah, it's a great big massive canopy tree, and you can see on the aerial photo there this strip of vegetation that sort of comes along the spine in between Rosewood and Valley Garden and the east side of North Walsham. There was some comments about where this tree actually is, and this is a snip from the Land Registry Office, where you can see the unregistered land that has been left between the two developments, and this is often where the trees are. Anyway, the fences have been moved and they are now along that back edge of Rosewood. So it's why the TPO title is land east of or west of. So here we've got some historical maps of North Walsham, and you can see the RAF black and white map showing those field boundaries, and I've done a little black circle where those tree would have been in those field boundaries, and you can see there they're already quite large canopy trees, so quite a conservative estimate of 150 to 200 years. And the next map in the 1980s is where Valley Gardens was built out, and you can see again the trees retained there in the backdrop. And right back to the tithe map in the 1800s, where you can see, there is a field boundary. Those sort of ecological corridors are important historically. It's valid that this is where the tree is situated.
It is interesting because I think this is what happens. It's happened around my area where building has taken place, and a strip of ancient woodland or ancient hedgerow has been left, and nobody looks after it.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Yeah, so it's visible from a number of spots, from Valley Gardens, Brickelm, Rosewood, and here's a close-up of the tree. And you can see again, it is close to some of the buildings, but not, we could manage that tree with a bit of sensitive pruning work. And I think it's important to say that, this tree preservation order doesn't prevent management from happening. That's not our intention. Pruning work may well be appropriate to reduce that canopy back, but you can see what's happened next door where, sorry, Laura, next one, thank you. This oak tree in the same boundary has been very heavily reduced and has since died. So this is, you know, the last standing tree on that strip. The last one. Everything else has been taken out now. So I think it is important that we, you know, we confirm this order as well.
Thank you, Imogen.
Thank you.
Very good reports, my love, I must say.
Thank you
for these, your first lot. Paul, you going to say something now?
Yes, very briefly, Madam Chairman. Yes, I've been contacted by a certain vociferous objector to this TPO. Something that we visited the site, and yes, the tree is in need of some attention. You know, it has been neglected, so but that is no reason to remove it. And you look at the neighbouring tree, as Imogen Slide have shown us, you know, left to their own devices, somebody will go and butcher this tree, and we cannot have that. It is a very substantial oak tree, very important for biodiversity in a rather limited area of biodiversity. So I'm quite happy to propose acceptance of the TPO.
Right, you're proposing, have I a seconder for this one? Councillor Brown.
Take your pick.
Well, just 1 second, because Gerard's before you, Andrew. Gerard, I'd like to speak. You're number one again.
Well, you don't often get a TPO and all of a sudden you get 3 in a row. It's like yeah, again on this one, the question I would like to ask is who's responsible for maintaining the tree? Because sometimes if it's left to the residents, they tend to be more butchers rather than tree surgeons. And yeah, again, same as before, tree was there first, and if you don't like it, don't move. Thank you.
So the owner of the land is responsible for the management of the tree, and as you can see here on the land registry, there's a bit of that. Well, who is actually registered to this piece of land, and I think you know, if we think about it sensibly, you know, the fences have been moved. There may be some adverse possession happening. Well, actually, that's a good thing, I think, in this example, because you know, there's no other input, but again, you know, if we don't know exactly who it is, how can we control that situation? So I think, you know, it doesn't, someone can apply to work on a tree, they don't necessarily have to be the owner, but we might need to put up site notices in this instance if someone comes to us with a tree work application.
Joe, what's the definition for adverse possession? Because it's 11, 12 years, isn't it, when nobody's claimed it?
I think it's longer than that, off the top of my head. I'll double check, but I think it's close to 20.
Is it?
20.
Chair, I may be able to help here. It's 12 years for registered land and 10 years for unregistered land. The 20-year rule is establishment of easements.
I thought it was 12 years because I know.
I stand corrected. Thank you.
That's all right. We don't mind correcting you, but yeah, we don't mean it unpleasantly. Right, we'll now go to Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to second this recommendation. I think it's probably a lucky day for North Walsham. It's the second item on the agenda affecting North Walsham. As we know, North Walsham is under pressure in other parts of the town, particularly down Norwich Road, from pressures from developers. So it's pleasing to be able to protect what we already have, particularly as it's the last. I hesitate to say man or woman standing. I'm not sure how we regard trees, whether they're male or female in the scheme of things, but it's certainly the last tree standing. So I'm very happy to support the officer's recommendation and welcome the officer to her new role.
Yes, exactly. Oak trees are wonderful. They are one of our most fruitful and pleasant trees. I think they're lovely. Only thing is when they drop their acorns on top of my head, which they do every now and again, you know, just this year, absolutely full on. Anyway, I rabbit on. So the recommendation is to have this order confirmed. And we go to proposed by councillor Heinrich, seconded by councillor Brown. Could we have the vote, please?
Councillor Brown,
For.
councillor Fisher,
For.
councillor Fitch-Tillett, for councillor Grove-Jones,
For.
councillor Heinrich,
For.
councillor Holiday, councillor Kershaw,
For.
councillor Mancini Boyle,
For.
councillor Pearce, councillor Toy,
For.
and councillor Varley. That is unanimous, 11 votes for.
Thank you, Imogen, and welcome, and I'll try and not forget you next time, and apologies for that. Now you now move swiftly on to, and I'm going to be careful what I say here again. You're commenting on. I'd never forgotten that. I mean, the giggles that came from all of you is dreadful. The what? Well, there we go. Are they being rude to you? No.
Yes, there'll be a
Right.
complaint coming in soon.
Right, page 223.
Okay, so this set out the performance for the month up to the 31st of October. So major performance, we had one decision in time and 101 non-major decisions, and over 98% of those were in time. So performance for that month continues to be good, and overall the 24-month average is 86.1% for majors and 80% for non-majors. Now the non-majors figure, the figure's gone down a little bit, and that's attributable to poor period of performance when we introduced the new uniform system. So we're sort of carrying that to the legacy of that poor performance. And so that drops off the end of the 24-month conveyor belt. So that's kind of explained why the figures have gone down a little bit. Fiona at this point would normally go through the section 106 obligations. I don't know if Joe wants to do that, or do you want me to go through the section 106?
Oh, no, you feel free.
Okay.
Go through it.
There's not a lot of change from the last time you've probably seen them. So we are still on with the application Scarsdale Enterprise Park. I think that's moving very close now to getting that one there.
Sorry, Jeff, if I might comment on that one. I had a meeting with Swift Air last week, and they were concerned that that wasn't, that it wouldn't be done by the end of the year. I know Hethel have approved it, and I know Fiona's on top of it, but I think it's county that are dragging their heels. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't get that at all. Swift or what?
Swift Air are the people that have got the S106.
Yes, yes.
They are concerned that it isn't finished by
Oh,
by
right.
the end of this year, because
Okay.
that's the time term.
Right, there's a time limit, isn't there? Okay, and I think there was some problems with the first one, 1749. Didn't Fiona say she's taking that off?
Well, there's a couple of the obligations on here that haven't actually received the resolution either under delegated powers or committee powers. They're on here because there were negotiations were started, but they've sort of ceased on some of them whilst we resolve the way forward for the application. So some of these obligations are here, but there's not a lot of activity going on them at this time. But they're there just so people know what we're involved in.
Right, we now go over to the appeals section. Sorry, John, yes.
Thank you. I was just ask, are we still hoping for section 106 software at some time? Because originally that was talked about for September.
The 5th of December is the date that we have for the system. So it's not going to be fully functioned at that point, but the data, a lot of the section 106 data will be in there. But in terms of the payments received and where it's been attributable to, we're still waiting for a 106 officer to be appointed who will lead on that activity.
Okay, just on the way we were. Thank you.
Bizarre. Bizarre. Right. Okay, Jeff.
Right, so on the appeals front, there's still a long list for you to read through, and
Getting longer, it seems to me.
we've not had a huge amount of decision from the inspectorate. So really, it's just it's a members update, and if anyone has any particular questions or queries, either myself or we'll probably be able to. If you want any particular updates on anything that's.
Will Arcady happen in January?
It's something like losing a new, an old friend, wouldn't it? If it is sorted out. Which one of them? Yeah. We don't know. I think we just don't really know about that one. As you can see, we seem to be getting longer and longer, which is distressing because when you get to the last page, there are no decisions. That's the first time I think I've had one of these with no decisions at all, which doesn't bode well. So has anybody else anything to say on any of these? Yes, Richard.
Before we close the meeting, I'd just like to say how refreshing it's been. In the last month, I've been contacted by planning officers on 6 or 7 applications going forward to have a conversation about where they go. And it's really good to have those conversations, and they've resulted in parish councils being pleased and applications moving through. So it's a great improvement. So could you pass that on to the officers? Thank you.
Yes, it's nice to praise our officers because we all know how hard they work. And I mean, sometimes they're between a rock and a hard place because there's nothing they say will be accepted by everybody. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone. We are actually finished at nearly 20 to 1. Time to get off and have your lunch. And we'll see you next on the, is it the 9th of December? The 8th of December.